Under the glass of a museum case, a piece of dinosaur skin does not look like skin at first. It looks like dark stone. A flattened patch, a roughened surface, a place where the light catches hundreds of small raised shapes, each one no larger than a seed, arranged in a pattern that once covered a living body. There is no blood in it now, no warmth, no smell of mud or river water, but the pattern is still there, pressed into rock with such care that the animal seems less extinct than interrupted. A fossil like this changes the way a dinosaur enters the mind. Bones can tell us how a limb carried weight, how a jaw opened, how a tail balanced the body. Teeth can tell us what an animal could bite. Tracks can show where it stepped and how fast it may have moved. Skin does something different. Skin brings the outside of the animal back. It gives the body a surface again. The word mummy is usually misleading when it is used for dinosaurs. These are not mummies in the human sense. No careful hands wrapped them. No tomb preserved them. Most do not contain original soft flesh. Often they are impressions, mineral films, or clay templates that recorded the shape of the surface before the body finally collapsed into the long work of fossilization. But the word has stayed because it gestures toward the same surprise. Something soft should have disappeared. Instead, part of it remained. The title Dinosaur Mummy sounds almost too complete, as if a whole animal might have crossed from the Cretaceous into the present with its hide still drawn across its ribs. The truth is quieter and more interesting. The skin is usually not skin anymore. The feathers are not feathers in the way a bird carries them through the air. The colors are not sitting on the fossil like paint waiting to be seen. What remains are traces of structure, chemistry, and shape. Those traces matter because for most of the history of dinosaur science, the outside of dinosaurs had to be guessed. Skeletons were mounted, muscles were reconstructed. Artists chose colors from living reptiles, elephants, rhinos, birds, or simple imagination. A brown dinosaur seemed plausible. A green dinosaur seemed plausible. Gray, dull red, patterned, striped, spotted, bare, scaly, feathered, all of it was possible because the bones did not decide the surface. Then, the surface began to answer back. A scale pattern found beside a hadrosaur rib. A feather halo around a small theropod. A banded tail preserved in fine volcanic sediment, a three-dimensional armored body from an old seafloor. A duck-billed dinosaur, wrapped not in tissue, but in a thin clay skin that copied its outline. Each discovery narrowed the space between speculation and evidence. If these traces of deep time are why you return to Jurassical, subscribing keeps the next one within reach. The world that produced these fossils was not one world, but many. Late Jurassic lagoons, where feathered animals settled into fine limestone. Early Cretaceous lakebeds where ash, silt, and quiet water covered bodies before decay could take everything. Coastal lowlands where hadrosaurs walked through muddy river systems. Floodplains where carcasses dried in the sun and then disappeared under sudden sediment. Shallow seas where an armored dinosaur sank upside down into darkness and waited for miners more than 100 million years later. Fossil skin is rare because skin is made to fail. It stretches, heals, bleeds, sheds, rots, and feeds bacteria. After death, it loosens quickly. Scavengers tear it. Sun dries it. Water swells it. Insects and microbes reduce it to pieces. For skin to enter the fossil record, several things must happen in the right order, and the order matters. The animal must die in a place where burial can come quickly, or where the surface can dry before it is destroyed. Sediment must be fine enough to capture detail. Chemistry must not erase what it has just recorded. This is why dinosaur mummies are not evenly scattered through the Mesozoic. They gather in certain formations, certain environments, certain kinds of mud. River channels can bury a carcass in sand, but coarse sand does not always preserve fine skin texture. Floodplain clays can hold small details, especially when microbial films help bind the surface. Lake deposits can be still enough to receive feathers like pressed leaves, Volcanic ash can fall with a suddenness that turns an ordinary death into an exceptional fossil. Imagine a hadrosaur lying on a Cretaceous floodplain after a season of drought. The body is large, warm at first, then cooling. The skin tightens as it dries. The belly sinks. Scavengers may open the side. Small bites mark the surface. Flies and beetles come and leave. The animal is not being protected from decay. It is passing through decay in a particular way. Drying can make the skin resistant for a time, holding its shape long enough for sediment to arrive. In older explanations, dinosaur mummies were often imagined as carcasses buried very quickly, before scavengers could damage them. That can happen, but it is not the only path. Some specimens show signs of exposure, feeding, and drying before burial. The surprising point is that damage does not always prevent preservation. In some cases, it may help by opening the body, allowing gases and fluids to escape, and keeping the skin from bloating away from the bones. Paleontologists call this part of the process biostratinommy, the study of what happens between death and final burial. It is not glamorous, but it is essential. A skin impression is not simply a photograph of life. It is life, death, scavenging, weather, sediment, microbes, and chemistry layered together. To read it properly, scientists have to ask not only what the animal looked like, but what happened to the body after it stopped moving. A single square of fossil skin can hold several stories at once. The shape of the scales can describe the living surface. The distortion of those scales can show how the carcass shrank or folded. The sediment around them can show whether the body lay in a channel, on a floodplain, or in a quiet deposit of clay. Bite marks can reveal scavengers. Mineral films can show the chemistry of the burial environment. Even absence becomes information, because where skin is missing, something removed it. The Mesozoic ground was not waiting gently for dinosaurs to fall onto it. It was full of other mouths. Crocodiliforms along river margins. Small theropods, insects, microbes, fungi, the same ecosystems that could preserve a fossil could also dismantle one completely. Most dinosaurs left no skin because most dinosaurs were taken apart by their own worlds before geology had a chance to intervene. This is why the famous specimens carry such weight. A dinosaur mummy is not just a prettier fossil. It is a rare interruption in the usual loss. It can reveal the shape of a tail crest, the covering of a hand, the underside of a foot, the arrangement of scales across the neck, the presence of bristles, quills, filaments, or feathers. It can test old assumptions about what dinosaurs looked like, and sometimes it breaks them. For a long time, a dinosaur was often imagined from the inside outward. First, the skeleton. Then the muscles. Then a simple skin, usually stretched close to the bones like a covering over machinery. But living animals are not skeletons wearing tight suits. They have fat, cartilage, pads, keratin, folds, display structures, loose skin, crests, lips or lipless mouths depending on the group, feathers, scars, colors, dirt, and seasonal changes. The outside of an animal is not decoration. It is where the body meets the world. Skin keeps water in. Scales resist abrasion. Feathers hold heat, signal to mates, hide the body, or catch the air. Pigment protects tissue from sunlight. Patterns break up the outline of a living shape. A crest can identify a species from a distance. A tail fan can turn a moving animal into a visible message. When paleontology recovers these surfaces, it recovers behavior as well as appearance. The title promises skin, feathers, and lost colors, but those are not separate subjects. They are parts of the same question. What did dinosaurs look like when they were alive? Not as bone diagrams, not as monsters, as animals with bodies exposed to light, weather, predators, mates, parasites, mud, water, and plants. The answer begins in stone. But it does not end there. It moves from quarries to microscopes, from museum drawers to chemistry labs, from the scale of a whole carcass down to organelles smaller than dust. It asks why a duck-billed dinosaur had pebble scales and hoof-like coverings, why a small feathered dinosaur carried a striped tail, why an armored herbivore may have worn reddish-brown camouflage, why some colors can be recovered, and why others are still gone. To follow that evidence, we have to begin with the bodies that came closest to keeping their surfaces, the so-called mummies, the dinosaurs that did not merely leave bones, but outlines of skin. Their fossils are not perfect. They are not time machines, but they are among the closest things paleontology has to seeing a dinosaur from the outside. One of the earliest dinosaur mummies to become famous did not look famous when it came out of the ground. It came from the Badlands of Wyoming in the early 20th century, when fossil hunters moved through the American West with picks, plaster, notebooks, and a tolerance for distance that is difficult to imagine now. Charles Sternberg and his sons were searching the Cretaceous rocks for bones, but what they found was more than a skeleton. It was a duck-billed dinosaur with large areas of skin preserved across the body. At the time, the animal was called Trachodon. Later, as names changed and the anatomy was studied more carefully, it became part of the long scientific history of Edmontosaurus and its relatives. The name matters less than the fossil itself. Here was a large herbivorous dinosaur, not represented only by vertebrae and limb bones, but by a hide. The skin showed small polygonal scales. It showed that hadrosaurs were not smooth like whales or uniformly armored like crocodiles. Their surface was more varied. These early mummies shaped public imagination because they offered a kind of proof that paintings and skeletons could not. Visitors could stand in front of a museum mount and see actual skin texture, not guessed texture, not a sculptor's texture, fossil texture. The scales were arranged in patches, changing shape across the body. Some were rounded, some were stretched. Some areas had larger tubercles set among smaller ones. The animal's skin was a landscape. On a living hadrosaur, that landscape would have moved. It would have pulled over the ribs as the chest expanded. It would have folded around the joints as the animal walked. Mud would have collected where the feet sank near a river edge. Water would have run over the flanks during crossing. Dust would have settled on the back. A mosquito or biting fly might have landed between the scales and vanished under a twitch of skin. Fossilization removes motion, and this can make a skin impression seem more simple than the animal really was. A flat patch of fossil hide may once have belonged to a rounded thigh. A wrinkle may be a living fold, or it may be a collapse after death. A scale may be stretched by decay. When paleontologists describe these specimens, they are reading a surface that has been changed by burial. The preservation is extraordinary, but it still has to be interpreted. The remarkable thing is that enough remains to interpret at all. A hadrosaur was not a small animal. Adult Edmontosaurus could grow longer than a bus, with a deep body, long tail, strong hind limbs, and a mouth built for processing plants. It lived near the end of the Cretaceous in landscapes that also held Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, crocodilians, turtles, fish, flowering plants, conifers, and broad floodplains crossed by shifting rivers. In that world, a dead hadrosaur was a resource. It was meat, fat, skin, gut contents, marrow, and smell. A Tyrannosaurus might have opened it. Smaller theropods might have pulled at what remained. Crocodiliforms could have fed if the body lay near water. Insects would have arrived in numbers. The idea that a huge carcass could keep its skin long enough to be preserved should feel unlikely, because it was unlikely. Yet several hadrosaur mummies show that preservation did not require the body to be untouched. In some cases, the skin may have dried and tightened after the carcass was opened. Dehydration can turn soft tissue into a more durable shell for a short time. Later burial can press sediment against that dried surface, creating a mold. If minerals or clay films form quickly, they can copy the texture before the original tissue disappears. Recent studies have made this pathway clearer. Some Edmontosaurus specimens do not preserve skin as original biological material. they preserve a very thin coating of sediment that formed against the surface of the carcass. The soft tissue is gone, but the template remains. It is a copy of a copy made during decay, and still it can carry details of scales, hooves, soft crests, and other external structures. That is the strange gift of these fossils. They are not simple survivals. They are translations. A living skin becomes a dried surface. A dried surface becomes a sediment mask. The sediment mask becomes stone. Scientists then read the stone back into anatomy. At each step, information is lost, but sometimes enough is kept for the animal to regain an outline. The hoof-like feet of recently described Edmontosaurus mummies are a reminder that even familiar dinosaurs can still change. Edmontosaurus is not obscure. It has been known from many skeletons. It appears in museum halls around the world. Its general body plan has been reconstructed for generations, yet the surface of its feet was still capable of surprising science. Hooves do not mean Edmontosaurus was a horse in dinosaur form. The anatomy was different, and the evolutionary history was different. But the coverings on the feet suggest a broad, weight-bearing structure around the digits, a way of contacting the ground that may have helped a large herbivore move across firm and muddy surfaces. Fossil bones alone can suggest posture, but soft tissue tells us how the foot actually met the earth. Picture the animal walking along a late Cretaceous river margin. The floodplain is open in some places and shaded in others. Leaves from angiosperms, conifers, and shrubs gather in shallow channels. Its forelimbs touch down differently from the hind limbs. Its mouth crops vegetation close to the ground, then higher where it can reach. Beneath the body, each step presses a hoof, like covering into damp sediment. The mark fills with water after the foot lifts. Tracks and mummies speak to each other. A footprint shows the shape left in mud. A mummified foot shows the structure that made the print. When both kinds of evidence are compared, paleontologists can move from isolated impressions to living mechanics. They can ask whether a track was made by a bare digit, a pad, a claw, or a broader covering. They can ask how much soft tissue surrounded the bones. Similar caution applies to the soft midline crest reported in some hadrosaur mummies. Hadrosaurs are already known for display structures, especially the hollow crests of lambeosaurines such as Parasaurolophus and Corythosaurus. Edmontosaurus lacked those tall, bony tubes, but soft tissue can create shapes that the skeleton does not reveal. A fleshy crest or ridge can vanish almost completely unless the surface is preserved. This is one reason dinosaur silhouettes have changed over time. Early restorations often followed the bones too closely, producing animals that looked starved or simplified. Soft tissue discoveries add volume where the skeleton is silent. They can raise the backline, thicken the tail base, broaden the feet, or reveal a flap of skin and keratin where bone gives no clear warning. There is a humility in this. A skeleton can be complete and still not complete enough. An animal can be known from skull, ribs, pelvis, limbs, and tail, and still keep secrets in the parts that usually rot away. The fossil record is full of bodies that have been reduced to their strongest elements. The mummies remind us how much of an animal is not bone. The same is true for scales. Dinosaur scales were not all the same. Hadrosaur skin often shows fields of small, rounded, or polygonal scales. Ceratopsian skin, where preserved, can include larger, more irregular tubercles. Sauropod skin impressions show pebbled surfaces, sometimes with small, non-overlapping scales. Carnotaurus, the horned theropod from South America, preserved skin impressions with large conical feature scales set within smaller ones across parts of the body. These scale patterns matter because they correct the old assumption that all dinosaurs were covered like modern lizards. Many dinosaur scales were not overlapping plates. They were often small, tuberculate, and set side by side. They formed flexible surfaces suitable for huge bodies, powerful limbs, and different habitats. The outside of a dinosaur was not borrowed whole from a crocodile or iguana. It had its own architecture. A fossil skin impression is easy to overlook beside a skull with teeth. Teeth announce themselves. Horns announce themselves. A patch of scales asks for slower attention. It asks someone to notice the repeating pattern, the change in size, the faint edge where the surface turns. It asks a scientist to care about a part of the animal that once touched air, water, mud, insects, and sunlight. In that attention, the dinosaur becomes less like a symbol and more like an animal. The hide is not a costume around the skeleton. It is the boundary that the dinosaur lived through. It is where injury healed, where parasites bit, where rain struck, where color sat, where heat passed in and out, where the body encountered its Cretaceous world. The mummies bring us to the outside. They do not give everything back. They do not restore the sound of the animal moving through reeds, or the color of every scale under morning light. But they tell us that the surface was there, complex and specific. They tell us that the lost body had texture. Another famous kind of dinosaur mummy begins not on a dry floodplain, but in an industrial mine. In 2011, heavy equipment working in the oil sands of Alberta struck something harder and stranger than the surrounding rock. The blocks that came out did not look like the scattered bones of an ordinary skeleton. They held the front half of an armored dinosaur in 3 dimensions, the body still carrying its armor, its skin impressions, and the shape of a living surface preserved with almost unsettling clarity. That dinosaur was later named Borealopelta markmichelli, an early Cretaceous notosaurid. It lived roughly 110 million years ago, not at the end of the dinosaur age, but in a time when inland seas, coastal forests, and warm climates shaped western North America. Unlike ankylosaurids with tail clubs, notosaurids were armored without that final heavy weapon. Borealopelta had broad plates, shoulder spikes, and a body built low and strong, a living fortress moving through vegetation. The fossil is extraordinary because it is preserved in 3 dimensions. Many skin impressions are flattened. Feathers are often pressed into slabs. A body in river sediment may collapse into a distorted shape. Borealopelta kept the contour of the neck, shoulders, armor, and hide. The animal looks less like a skeleton and more like a sculpture that has been made by geology from the original body. Its preservation required a specific journey. The animal probably died on land or near the coast, then was carried out into the sea. Gases in the body may have floated it for a time. Eventually it sank, landing on the seafloor belly up or in a position that allowed rapid burial in fine sediment. In that oxygen-poor setting, scavenging and decay were limited enough for the armored surface to be preserved before the body disappeared into minerals. There is something strange about an armored land dinosaur becoming a marine fossil. Borealopelta did not live in the open water. It did not swim among marine reptiles as part of its normal life, yet the sea became the place that saved its surface. A body built for browsing on land ended up in a quiet underwater grave, far from the plants it had eaten and the predators it had avoided. Borealopelta also carried chemical evidence of color. Researchers found signs consistent with reddish-brown pigmentation, especially across the upper surfaces of the animal. The distribution suggested countershading, with a darker back and lighter underside. In living animals, countershading can help reduce the appearance of a body in light, making the animal harder to detect by flattening its visual outline. Countershading is common in the modern world. Deer have it, fish have it, sharks have it. Many animals are darker above and paler below. What made Borealopelta surprising was its size and armor. An animal weighing around a ton, covered in bony plates and shoulder spikes, might seem beyond the need for camouflage, yet the evidence suggests that concealment still mattered. That tells us something about the predators around it. The early Cretaceous was not gentle for a notosaur. Large theropods shared those ecosystems, animals capable of testing armor, watching for weakness, attacking juveniles, sick individuals, or exposed flanks. Even a heavily defended herbivore could benefit from being less visible. Armor does not prevent every danger. Sometimes not being seen is the first defense. The surface of Borealopelta also shows the relationship between skin and armor. The bony plates were not bare bones sticking through the hide. They were covered in keratin sheaths, like the horn covering over a modern bovid horn or the scute covering of a turtle shell. This matters because bone alone underestimates the full shape. The living spikes and plates were larger, sharper, and more visually imposing than the dry osteoderms might suggest. Keratin rarely fossilizes well, but in exceptional cases it can leave shapes or chemical residues. When it does, it changes reconstructions. A bony core may be only the foundation. The living structure may have been longer, smoother, darker, brighter, or more curved. Horns, beaks, claws, armor scutes, and spikes all depend on keratin for their complete appearance. Fossil mummies and skin traces help restore that missing layer. Imagine Borealopelta moving through low Cretaceous vegetation. Its body is close to the ground. The back is armored and dark reddish-brown. The belly is paler. The shoulder spikes project outward, not as museum fragments, but as sheathed, living weapons. Sunlight filters through conifers and early flowering plants. The animal lowers its head to feed, while somewhere beyond the trees a large predator moves through shade. The animal does not need to know that it is camouflaged. Natural selection does not require awareness. Individuals that were slightly harder to see may have survived attacks more often. They may have reached adulthood more often. They may have left more offspring. Over many generations, a color pattern becomes part of the body because it works in the eyes of other animals. Still, paleocolor is not simple. Chemical residues can be altered. Pigments decay. Burial chemistry can move elements. Scientists compare fossil signals with modern tissues, use microscopic structure, and test alternative explanations. The result is not a perfect paint chart. It is a carefully argued reconstruction with confidence in some areas and uncertainty in others. Borealopelta is one of the strongest examples because the body is so complete and the preservation so unusual. The fossil allows color pattern, armor arrangement, skin texture, and body contour to be considered together. It is not a single feather under a microscope. It is a large animal's external anatomy preserved across enough of the body to suggest how the whole creature may have appeared in life. That completeness is rare. It can make the fossil feel almost unfair to the rest of the record. For every Borealopelta, there are millions of dinosaurs represented by fragments: a tooth, a vertebra, a broken limb bone, a few pieces of skull. Most species will never give up their skin, their colors, or their soft outlines. They remain skeletal because the conditions that preserved Borealopelta almost never occur. But when they do occur, they change the questions scientists ask. A paleontologist looking at an armored dinosaur is no longer limited to counting osteoderms and measuring limb proportions. They can ask how the armor was sheathed, whether color helped hide the body, how the skin wrapped around the plates, and what the animal looked like from the view of a predator standing among Cretaceous plants. That predator's view is important. Color is not for the fossil collector. Color belongs to living interactions. It matters only in light, in habitat, in movement, in the visual systems of other animals. A red-brown back in a forest means something different from a red-brown back on an open salt flat. A pale underside means something different under dense shade than under open sky. The fossil gives the pattern. Ecology gives the pattern meaning. This is why paleontologists often compare fossil color patterns with modern analogs, but they do so carefully. Modern animals are not exact copies of dinosaurs. A deer is not a nodosaur. A crocodile is not a hadrosaur. A crow is not Microraptor, though it is a living theropod. Comparisons can suggest possibilities, but the fossil has to remain the anchor. Borealopelta's anchor is its body. The armor along the neck, the curve of the shoulder, the preserved sheath over the plates. The chemistry of the surface. The fact that a land animal traveled into a seaway and entered the record almost whole from the shoulders forward. It is a fossil that carries both violence and stillness. The violence of death, transport, decay, burial. The stillness of a surface that refused to vanish. In the title of this story, dinosaur mummies are not curiosities. They are evidence of lost exteriors. Edmontosaurus tells us about pebbled skin, hooved feet, soft crests, and clay templates. Borealopelta tells us about armor, keratin, pigmentation, and camouflage. Together, they show that the outside of dinosaurs was more complicated than old restorations allowed. The bones made dinosaurs visible to science. The mummies made them visible as animals. Skin impressions are not limited to duck-billed dinosaurs and armored herbivores. They appear across the dinosaur tree, scattered unevenly through time and rock. Each one carries a different kind of correction. A sauropod scale patch reminds us that even the largest animals had a surface made from small, repeated units. A theropod skin impression reminds us that some predatory dinosaurs kept scales on parts of the body. A ceratopsian hide reveals a body that may have been more visually complex than the horned skull alone suggests. Sauropod skin is especially important because their bones invite exaggeration. The necks are long, the ribs are enormous. The limb bones can look like tree trunks. A dinosaur that large can become abstract, almost architectural in the imagination. Skin impressions return the animal to biology. They show that the hide covering a sauropod was made of relatively small scales, often pebbly, arranged across a body that weighed many tons. A sauropod standing in a Jurassic floodplain would have needed skin that could stretch over immense muscles and withstand constant contact with plants, dust, parasites, and sunlight. The scales may have helped reduce abrasion. They may have controlled water loss. They formed a tough outer layer over an animal whose size already created problems of heat, movement, and circulation. The skin was not decorative. It was part of how gigantism functioned. Picture a diplodocus crossing a muddy flat near a braided river. Its feet sink deep, and the tail balances behind. Ferns bend under its steps. The body is high above the ground, but the skin along the lower legs brushes wet stems and grit. Each scale is too small to notice from a distance. Up close, the surface becomes a field of tiny shapes, repeating over a body so large that no single patch can describe the whole animal. We should not imagine all sauropods with identical hides. The group lasted for more than 100 million years and spread across many continents. A late Jurassic diplodocid in North America, a Cretaceous titanosaur in South America, and a basal sauropod in an older landscape may have differed in scale size, skin thickness, keratinous features, and perhaps color. The fossil record gives windows, not a complete catalog. Theropod skin is even more complicated because theropods include both scaly animals and feathered animals, and sometimes the same lineage may show different coverings on different parts of the body. Birds are theropods, and a bird foot is covered in scales while the body carries feathers. This basic pattern warns against simple categories. A dinosaur could have scales on the snout, feet, or tail, and feathers across the neck, arms, back, or body. Fossil skin impressions from large theropods have shown scales in several cases. Carnotaurus preserved patches from the neck, body, tail, and limbs, with small scales and larger feature scales. Tyrannosaurid skin impressions have been interpreted by some researchers as evidence that at least parts of their bodies were scaly. These finds do not erase feathers from theropod evolution. They show that integument could be regionally varied and evolutionarily flexible. This distinction matters because public arguments about dinosaur appearance often become too simple. Were dinosaurs scaly or feathered? The answer is yes, depending on which dinosaur, which body part, which time, which environment, and which lineage. Feathers did not arrive as a costume thrown over every dinosaur at once. Scales did not disappear from theropods when feathers evolved. The living surface of dinosaurs was a mosaic. A modern bird makes this easy to see. Look at the smooth feathers of the body, the scaly toes, the keratin claw, the beak, the bare skin around the eye in some species, the colored wattles in others. One animal can carry many kinds of surface. The Mesozoic likely held even more variety because many lineages were experimenting with coverings that no longer exist in the same combinations. This variety makes the fossil record both powerful and frustrating. A patch of scales on the tail of one animal does not prove the entire animal was naked. A feather halo around a small species does not prove every large relative was fully feathered. Paleontology must resist making a single fossil answer a larger question than it can answer. The evidence is specific, and its specificity is its strength. Ceratopsian skin impressions add another layer. Horned dinosaurs are often reconstructed from their skulls first, because the skulls are spectacular. Triceratops alone can dominate a museum hall with horn cores and a broad frill. But the body behind that skull had its own surface. Skin impressions attributed to ceratopsians show large scales or tubercles in some areas, sometimes arranged among smaller scales, suggesting a hide more textured than a plain reptilian covering. Some ceratopsian relatives may also have carried bristle-like structures. Psittacosaurus, an early ceratopsian from the early Cretaceous of Asia, preserved long filamentous structures along the tail in at least one specimen. These are not the same as bird feathers, but they show that filamentous coverings were not restricted neatly to small theropods. They raise questions about deep evolutionary origins of feathers and bristle-like integuments across Dinosauria. Coelendrodromeus, a small Jurassic ornithischian from Siberia, deepened that question. Its fossils preserve a combination of scales and feather-like filaments. The animal was not a theropod. It was on the ornithischian side of the dinosaur tree, far from birds. If those filaments are homologous to feathers, then the capacity to produce feather-like structures may go very deep in dinosaur evolution. If they evolved independently, they still reveal repeated experimentation with filaments. Either way, the old image of dinosaurs as uniformly scaly reptiles is no longer sufficient. The skin of dinosaurs included scales, scutes, pebbled hide, armor sheaths, claws, beaks, bristles, filaments, and feathers. Some of these structures were ancient. Some changed function over time. Some were retained on certain body parts, while others were lost. The surface of the dinosaur body evolved as actively as the skeleton beneath it. The smallest traces can be the most disruptive. A fringe along a tail, a halo around the back, a patch of scale beside a knee, a preserved foot covering. None of these discoveries looks as dramatic as a complete skull, but each can change the animal more than another tooth or vertebra would. They do not add more bones, they add the animal's boundary. That boundary was shaped by climate. The Mesozoic was generally warmer than the modern world, though not uniform and not unchanging. The Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous held dry interiors, humid forests, polar seasons, coastal plains, inland deserts, and volcanic landscapes. Skin and feathers had to work in those environments. They had to manage heat, water, display, camouflage, injury, and growth. Feathers, especially simple filamentous ones, may have begun partly as insulation. Small animals lose heat quickly. A fuzzy covering can slow that loss. This does not mean every feather evolved for flight. In fact, the earliest feather-like structures almost certainly had nothing to do with powered flight. They were body coverings before they became wings. They could warm, signal, shade, waterproof, or display before any animal used them to cross the air. Once a filament exists, evolution can elaborate it. A simple hollow filament can branch. Branching can produce down-like structures. Further branching can create veined feathers with barbs and barbules. Some veined feathers become aerodynamic, others remain ornamental. In living birds, feathers have many roles. The fossil record shows that this complexity began before birds in the narrow modern sense. This is one of the great reversals in dinosaur science. Feathers were once used to separate birds from dinosaurs. Now, feathers help connect them. A bird in a tree is not a creature that escaped the dinosaur story. It is the part of the story that survived with its surface intact enough for us to see what feathers can do. But if feathers tell us about one branch of dinosaurs, scales tell us about others. There is no need to choose one surface for the entire group. Dinosauria was too large, too long-lived, and too ecologically varied for a single answer. The titles skin and feathers belong together because dinosaurs carried both. The lost colors sat in both. The secrets were not hidden in one type of covering, but in the diversity of coverings across the Mesozoic. A museum skeleton can make a dinosaur seem stripped down to certainty. Skin impressions and feathers restore uncertainty in a productive way. They make the animal harder to simplify and therefore more real. The feather evidence begins in fine-grained rock, not in the heavy sandstone that holds many large skeletons, but in deposits capable of preserving delicacy. Feathers need quiet. They need sediment that can receive a faint outline before the structure falls apart. They need burial fast enough to protect them, but gentle enough not to grind them away. This is why some of the most important feathered dinosaur fossils come from lake beds and volcanic landscapes where ash, mud, and still water work together. The Liaoning deposits of northeastern China transformed the subject in the 1990s and 2000s. Fossils from the Jehol biota showed small dinosaurs with feathers, or feather-like filaments around their bodies. Some were close relatives of birds, some were clearly non-avian dinosaurs. The effect was not a minor adjustment. It changed the default image of many theropods, especially small coelurosaurs, from scaly lizard-like predators into feathered animals with complex external coverings. Sinosauropteryx was among the first to make that shift unavoidable. It was a small, compsognathid theropod from the early Cretaceous, with a long tail and a covering of simple filamentous structures. When first described, its fibers were debated. Some argued they might be degraded collagen. Later studies of microscopic structures interpreted as melanosomes supported the idea that these were integumentary filaments related to feathers and even suggested color patterns. The animal itself was not huge. It did not shake the ground. It would not have towered above a person. Its importance came from the halo around it, from the fringe along the back and tail. In the fine sediment, the body was surrounded by traces that made the dinosaur look less like a bare reptile and more like a living experiment in insulation, display, and pattern. The tail of Sinosauropteryx carried bands. This is one of those facts that still feels new, even after years of discussion. A small predatory dinosaur did not simply have an outline. It had a pattern. Alternating lighter and darker regions likely ran along its tail, making that tail visible as a signal or broken as camouflage. A feature that once moved through Cretaceous vegetation became visible again through microscopic evidence. The colors inferred for Sinosauropteryx are not recovered in the simple way that a painter scrapes old pigment from a wall. Researchers examined melanosomes, pigment-bearing organelles whose shapes and arrangements can correlate with colors in living birds. Elongated melanosomes are often associated with dark eumelanin. More rounded forms can be associated with reddish or brownish pheomelanin. The comparison is statistical, not magical. That distinction is important. Melanosomes can tell us a great deal, but they do not preserve every color. Bright yellows, blues from many structural arrangements, carotenoid reds, bare skin flushes, and seasonal changes may leave little or no recoverable signal in many fossils. When paleontologists reconstruct color from melanosomes, they are often reconstructing the parts of color produced by melanin. The rest may remain lost. Anchiornis added another kind of detail. This small feathered dinosaur from the late Jurassic of China lived around the time when early birds and their close relatives were diversifying. It had feathers on the forelimbs, hind limbs, body, and tail. By sampling melanosomes across much of the fossil, researchers proposed a detailed color pattern, including dark and light regions and a reddish crest. For the first time, A dinosaur was not merely colored in broad possibility, it was mapped. Think about what that means. A fossil more than 150 million years old carried enough microscopic information for scientists to place color across different parts of the body. The head, the wings, the limbs, the body. The reconstruction may be revised in details as methods improve, but the achievement remains remarkable. A dinosaur had moved from silhouette to pattern. Anchiornis also shows that feathers were already complex before the origin of fully modern bird flight. Long feathers on the arms and legs suggest a body with multiple surfaces, not just a pair of wings. These feathers may have helped with gliding, display, maneuvering, insulation, or some combination of functions. Evolution did not proceed in a straight line from scale to wing. It produced many feathered bodies with different possibilities. Microraptor carried that complexity into the early Cretaceous. It was a small dromaeosaurid with long feathers on both arms and legs, often described as four-winged. Its anatomy suggests an animal capable of some form of aerial behavior, whether gliding, controlled descent, or more active wing-assisted movement. But its color evidence revealed something just as striking as its flight surfaces. The feathers were inferred to be glossy black and iridescent. Iridescence is not just color. It is color that changes with angle, produced by microscopic structure interacting with light. In living birds, iridescent feathers can flash blue, green, purple, or bronze, depending on how melanosomes and keratin are organized. For Microraptor, the evidence suggested a dark, shimmering surface, more like a crow, grackle, or starling than the dull green or brown reptiles once imagined for nearly all dinosaurs. This has behavioral implications. Iridescent plumage in modern birds is often associated with display, signaling, and species recognition. That does not mean Microraptor behaved exactly like any living bird. It does mean that the feathers probably did more than keep the animal warm or help it move through the air. They made the body visible in certain ways. They may have mattered to other Microraptor. A Microraptor perched in a Cretaceous tree would have been small enough to miss at first. A movement among leaves, a narrow head, long feathers folded close. Then the light turns, and the body is no longer just dark. It glints. The tail feathers catch brightness. The animal shifts again, and the color closes back into black. This is a dinosaur as a visual animal, not simply a predator with claws. Some reconstructions of fossil color are debated. That is expected. The field is young, and the fossils are difficult. Melanosomes can be altered by heat and pressure. Bacteria can complicate interpretation. Statistical comparisons with modern birds depend on the living samples chosen. A confident reconstruction requires multiple lines of evidence, and even then, it should be treated as a scientific model rather than a final portrait. Still, the broad change is secure. Feathered dinosaurs preserve microscopic structures that can carry color information. Some dinosaurs had patterned feathers. Some had reddish-brown regions. Some had dark or iridescent plumage. Some had stripes. This evidence has replaced the old idea that dinosaur color is completely unknowable. It is not completely knowable, but it is not completely hidden either. Kaihong, another small Paravian from Jurassic rocks of China, pushed the discussion further. Its name means rainbow, reflecting the possibility of iridescent coloration inferred from feather microstructure, especially around the head and neck. Whether every detail of its color remains certain or not, fossils like Kaihong show that the dinosaur-bird transition was visually rich. Small feathered dinosaurs were not necessarily plain. The Mesozoic forest, then, was not simply green plants and brown animals. It had glossy black feathers, pale wing patches, reddish crests, banded tails, dark backs, light bellies, and probably many colors we cannot recover. It had warning, hiding, mating, rivalry, seasonal display, and recognition. It had bodies built not only for survival, but for being seen or not seen by other eyes. Feathers also preserve behavior indirectly through wear and arrangement. A feathered tail fan may imply display or maneuvering. Long arm feathers can suggest aerodynamic surfaces or visual signals. Downy coverings suggest insulation. The placement of feathers on limbs and body helps scientists infer how they were used. As with skin, the surface is not separate from life. It is a functional system. The first feathered dinosaur fossils were shocking, partly because they crossed a boundary that people had kept too firm. Dinosaurs on one side, birds on the other, scales on one side, feathers on the other. Once the fossils appeared, that boundary became a slope. Archaeopteryx was no longer a lonely bridge. It became one point in a wider landscape of feathered bodies. A bird wing today is the refined result of that history, but a feather did not know where it was going. It began as structure. It changed by selection. It gathered functions. It warmed a body, showed a pattern, shed water, covered a nest, helped a leap, slowed a fall, caught air, and eventually carried descendants across the sky. This is why the feather record is more than a visual revelation. It changes how dinosaurs are placed in the living world. The sparrow on a fence, the crow on a road sign, the gull over a harbor, the owl moving through dusk, all carry a version of dinosaur skin transformed into plumage. Feathers are not an accessory added at the end of the dinosaur story. They are one of its major inventions. In the fossil slabs, they appear as dark stains and fine lines. In life, they would have shifted with breath and motion. They would have worn down, molted, grown again, caught dew, held dust, and bent under the touch of another animal. The fossil gives the outline. The living feather had weight, flexibility, and light. Skin mummies show the dinosaur exterior in scales and soft tissue. Feathered fossils show it in filaments and veins. Paleocolor studies show that some of those surfaces still hold microscopic evidence of pigment. Together, they move the question from whether dinosaurs had surfaces worth studying to how much of those surfaces can still be recovered. Color is one of the hardest things to preserve because color is not a single substance. Sometimes it is pigment, sometimes it is microscopic structure, sometimes it is blood under skin, or diet-derived molecules, or a surface that scatters light. A living animal's color can change with age, season, health, stress, breeding condition, wetness, and angle of view. A fossil can capture only a fraction of that complexity, and only under favorable conditions. Melanin is the main reason any dinosaur colors can be reconstructed at all. It is durable compared with many other pigments, and it occurs inside melanosomes, tiny organelles within cells. In modern birds, different melanosome shapes and arrangements correlate with different colors and effects. This does not give a perfect one-to-one translation, but it gives a measurable relationship. Fossil melanosomes can be compared with living databases to infer likely colors. Eumelanin is associated with black, gray, and dark brown. Pheomelanin is associated with reddish and yellowish browns. The shape, density, and distribution of melanosomes can suggest which pigment dominated in a fossil feather or skin region. In some cases, stacked or organized melanosomes can indicate iridescent structural color, especially when compared with modern birds whose feathers shimmer because of similar arrangements. The problem is that fossils do not preserve all pigments equally. Carotenoids, which produce many bright yellows, oranges, and reds in living birds, usually come from diet and can be chemically fragile. Structural blues and greens may depend on nanostructures that are easily altered. Bare skin colors may vanish almost completely. A dinosaur reconstructed from melanin evidence may be missing colors that were present in life but left no fossil signal. This means the colors we recover are not always the colors that mattered most. A crest could have flushed with blood during display and left no trace. A beak sheath might have carried yellow pigment that disappeared. A patch of bare skin near the eye may have been bright in life and invisible in the fossil. The absence of evidence is not the same as a gray animal. Modern birds make this caution obvious. A toucan's bill, a cassowary's neck, a turkey's head, a mandarin duck's plumage, a starling's sheen, a flamingo's color from diet. If these animals were fossilized under ordinary conditions, much of what makes them visually striking could be lost, or only partly recoverable. Future paleontologists might reconstruct a fragment of their appearance and still miss the living impression. Dinosaur paleocolor therefore works best when scientists state the limits clearly. In Anchiornis, melanosome sampling across the body allowed a relatively detailed reconstruction of melanin-based plumage. In Microraptor, melanosome geometry supported black iridescence. In Sinosauropteryx, patterns in filament regions suggested a banded tail and reddish-brown tones. In Borealopelta, chemical evidence supported reddish-brown pigmentation and countershading. These are strong cases, but they do not open every dinosaur to full color recovery. Most dinosaur fossils do not preserve melanosomes. Most are bone. Many are incomplete. Even when feathers are present, they may be too altered for confident color work. Even when skin is preserved, pigments may be gone or overwritten by mineral chemistry. For every dinosaur whose colors can be partially reconstructed, thousands remain visually unknown. That unknown space is not empty. It is where scientific restraint matters. A reconstruction can show plausible patterning without pretending certainty. A script can say perhaps, likely, may have, the evidence suggests. These words do not weaken the story. They make it trustworthy. The Mesozoic deserves imagination, but the imagination has to stay tied to stone. The old dinosaur colors were often chosen for dramatic effect or simplicity: green for forest animals, brown for large herbivores, gray for giants, bright red for danger. This was not always careless. Artists worked with the evidence available to them. But the evidence has changed. Dinosaur color is no longer only a question of what looks right. It is a question of microscopic traces, modern analogs, chemistry, and behavior. When scientists reconstruct a banded tail in Sinosauropteryx, they also ask why the tail was banded. It may have been camouflage in a habitat of filtered light and vegetation. It may have been used for display. It may have helped individuals recognize each other. It may have served several roles at once. Color rarely has one clean explanation. It is produced by anatomy and interpreted by ecology. Countershading provides a clearer example because it has a well-understood optical effect. A body lit from above is naturally brighter on top and darker below because of shadow. A dark back and light belly can counteract that gradient, making the body appear flatter and less obvious. In open habitats, countershading patterns often differ from those in dense forests. Studying the pattern can suggest something about environment as well as appearance. Psittacosaurus has become important here. A remarkably preserved specimen allowed researchers to reconstruct color patterning and test how it might work under different lighting conditions. The results suggested a countershaded animal adapted to a forested environment. This was not simply a matter of naming colors. It was a way of placing the animal back into light, shadow, and habitat. Psittacosaurus was not a giant. It was a small ceratopsian relative with a beaked mouth and a body far from the later grandeur of Triceratops. Some specimens preserve long bristles along the tail. It lived low to the ground, among plants where shadows broke up shapes. A countershaded body in such a setting would not vanish, but it could become harder to isolate from the background. For a small herbivore, that could matter. The visual world of dinosaurs depended on the eyes of other dinosaurs. A predator with sharp vision sees differently from a mammal relying heavily on smell. A mate looking for a display sees differently from a scavenger looking for exposed flesh. Color is always relational. It is not just what an animal is, it is what another animal can perceive. Living birds, as descendants of theropod dinosaurs, often have excellent color vision. including sensitivity beyond the range of human sight. This does not mean every non-avian dinosaur saw exactly like a modern bird. Vision evolved across lineages, but it does suggest that color and pattern could have played important roles, especially among feathered theropods and their relatives. A pattern invisible or dull to us may have been striking to them. Ultraviolet signals are one of the great missing possibilities. Many birds use ultraviolet reflectance in feathers and bare skin. Such signals are difficult to infer from fossils because they depend on structures and optical properties unlikely to survive. A dinosaur that looks plain in a melanin reconstruction may have carried of reflective patches that are completely gone. Lost colors may include colors human eyes cannot even see. This is why the phrase lost colors has two meanings. Some colors are lost because the fossils do not preserve them. Others are lost because they belong to sensory worlds different from ours. A dinosaur's appearance was not designed for a human viewer in a museum. It belonged to Cretaceous or Jurassic eyes under Mesozoic light, among plants, dust, water, and sky that no person ever saw. We can recover enough to be astonished, but not enough to be finished. That is the balance. Paleocolor has given us a reddish-brown armored dinosaur, a striped small theropod, a black iridescent glider, a patterned feathered dinosaur with a rusty crest, a counter-shaded little ceratopsian. It has not given us the full palette of the Mesozoic. The methods continue to improve. Researchers use scanning electron microscopy, chemical mapping, synchrotron techniques, comparisons with modern tissues, experimental decay, and statistical modeling. Each method can answer a different part of the question. Microscopy can show structure. Chemistry can show molecular residues or elemental patterns. Modern animals can provide comparison. Taphonomy can reveal what decay changed. Taphonomy remains the guardrail. Without it, color studies can become too eager. A dark patch may be pigment, or it may be a stain from decay. A microscopic body may be a melanosome, or it may resemble bacteria. Chemical residues may reflect original tissue or minerals introduced later. Good paleontology moves slowly through these possibilities rather than rushing toward a vivid image. Still, there is a human pull toward color. A skeleton is impressive, but color makes the animal step closer. It lets the mind move from anatomy to presence. A brown back, a pale belly, a black wing, a white stripe, a reddish crest. These details are small beside extinction, but they are intimate. They tell us that dinosaurs were not merely forms, they were seen by one another. A feather pattern can be a message. A camouflaged flank can be a defense. A dark back can be an answer to sunlight. A pale underside can be an answer to shadow. A glossy plume can be an answer to courtship or rivalry. A banded tail can be an answer to movement through leaves. Color is biology written in light. Fossils turn that light into stone. Science tries to turn a little of it back. The skin of a dinosaur was not only a surface for color, it was also a record of growth. Scales expanded as the body grew. Feathers molted and returned. Armor plates changed shape with age. Horn sheaths lengthened. Claws wore down and regrew. A dinosaur did not leave the egg with its final exterior already complete. Its surface passed through stages, and those stages may have changed how it lived. Juvenile dinosaurs are often proportioned differently from adults. A young hadrosaur did not carry the same mass, stride, or risk as a full-grown individual. A juvenile tyrannosaur was not simply a small adult. Young ceratopsians had smaller horns and frills that changed as they matured. If soft tissue and color followed similar patterns, then dinosaur appearance may have varied strongly through life. Fossils rarely preserve enough individuals with skin to show this clearly. Living animals provide reasons to expect change. Many young birds have duller plumage than adults. Juvenile reptiles can have different patterns from mature individuals. Mammals may lose spots or stripes as they grow. Color can protect young animals hiding in vegetation, then shift toward display in adulthood. Dinosaur color may have done the same, especially in animals with social behavior, herding, nesting sites, or visual signals. A young Edmontosaurus on a floodplain would have been vulnerable in a way an adult was not. Its skin could have carried patterns that helped break up its outline among plants. Its feet would have been smaller, its stride shorter, its body lower. If it moved with a group, the surfaces of other bodies would have surrounded it like moving walls. A mummy of a juvenile, when found, does not simply shrink the adult. It opens a different life stage. The recent Wyoming Edmontosaurus mummies include a juvenile and a larger individual, which makes them especially valuable. They allow paleontologists to compare external anatomy across growth stages, though even that comparison is limited by preservation and sample size. Still, having more than one body from related animals in the same general setting helps separate individual oddities from broader anatomy. Growth also affects feathers. A hatchling theropod might have needed insulation immediately, especially if it was small and active. Some young dinosaurs may have had downy coverings that changed as they matured. Others may have carried display feathers only later in life. Molting patterns, seasonal replacement, and feather wear are difficult to recover, but living birds show how dynamic a feathered surface can be. Dinosaur eggs and nests add indirect evidence. Embryos preserved inside eggs show developing skeletons, and some nesting sites suggest parental behavior or colonial nesting in certain species. If young were brooded, sheltered, or attended, then insulation and display could have had different roles at different ages. Feathers may have helped adults cover nests, as they do in birds. But direct evidence for such behavior is rare and must be handled cautiously. A nest is another surface story. Eggshell under the body. Sediment around the nest rim. Plant matter, perhaps, the warmth of an adult body if brooding occurred. Tiny bodies inside shells. The first skin or down of a hatchling. Most of this is gone. What remains are eggshell fragments, embryos, nest arrangements, and sometimes traces of posture. Even here, the outside of the animal is mostly absent. The fossil record preserves hard parts more readily than soft ones because mineralized tissues resist decay. Bone, teeth, eggshell, and armor enter the record more often. Skin and feathers appear only when unusual conditions intervene. This bias shapes our picture of dinosaurs. It makes horns and teeth seem dominant because horns and teeth survive. It makes color seem rare because color is rarely preserved, not because it was rare in life. Bias is not a flaw in the fossil record. It is the fossil record. Paleontologists do not work with a complete archive. They work with a damaged archive whose damage has patterns. Understanding those patterns is how the science becomes stronger. A missing feather can mean the animal lacked feathers, or it can mean the deposit could not preserve feathers. A missing color signal can mean the color was absent, or it can mean the chemistry erased it. This is why exceptional deposits, sometimes called Lagerstätten, are so important. They preserve details that ordinary deposits do not. The Solnhofen limestones of Germany gave the world Archaeopteryx, with feathers impressed around a small Jurassic body. The Jehol deposits of China preserved feathered dinosaurs, early birds, mammals, plants, insects, and volcanic ash layers. These places are not normal windows. They are rare clearings in the fog. Archaeopteryx remains central because it sits near the origin of birds in the late Jurassic. It had teeth, a long bony tail, clawed fingers, and feathers capable of aerodynamic function. For many years, it was the classic transitional fossil between reptiles and birds. Later discoveries did not diminish it. They placed it among a wider community of feathered dinosaurs and early birds, showing that many bird-like traits evolved before modern birds. In the Solnhofen limestone, feathers appear as impressions so fine that the animal seems pressed between pages. The lagoonal environment was quiet, chemically unusual, and capable of preserving delicate structures. Without that setting, Archaeopteryx might have been only a small skeleton with teeth and claws. With feathers, it became one of the most important fossils ever found. We should not imagine Solnhofen as a simple paradise. It was a late Jurassic island and lagoon system with restricted basins, carbonate muds, and conditions that could become hostile to life. Those same difficult conditions helped preservation. Low oxygen and fine sediment slowed the normal destruction of soft tissues. Once again, a fossil's beauty grew from a precise kind of environmental severity. The Jehol biota preserved another kind of world. Lakes, forests, volcanic eruptions, ash falls, and rapid burial created a record of early Cretaceous life that feels crowded with surfaces. Feathered dinosaurs, early birds, fish, insects, mammals, plants with leaves and seeds, frogs, salamanders. It is one of the places where the dinosaur age becomes visually dense again. Volcanic ash can be deadly, but it can also be a preservational gift. Fine ash settles quickly and can bury small bodies before they are dismantled. Minerals from volcanic material can influence fossilization. In some cases, repeated ash falls create layers that allow dating and environmental reconstruction. The same volcanic activity that disrupted living ecosystems helped preserve them for future study. A small feathered dinosaur caught near a lake is not dramatic in the way a predator attack is dramatic. It may simply die, settle, and be covered. The drama belongs to time. The body lies in sediment. Minerals move. Organic structures decay or transform. Pressure builds. Rock hardens. Mountains rise. Humans split the slab and find a shadow with feathers. Feather preservation can occur as carbonaceous films, impressions, mineral replacements, or combinations of structure and chemistry. Sometimes the feathers are visible to the eye as dark halos. Sometimes microscopic analysis is required. The quality of preservation determines what questions can be asked. A feather outline can show distribution. A microscopic structure can suggest color. A chemical map can test whether original biomolecules or residues remain. This technical work has changed paleoart, museum exhibits, and public understanding, but its deeper effect is scientific. Dinosaurs are no longer reconstructed from bones outward with nearly unlimited freedom. The surface now constrains the reconstruction. A feathered body has to be feathered. A scale pattern has to be respected. A countershaded armored dinosaur cannot be painted as a uniform gray block without ignoring evidence. Yet constraint can make imagination stronger. Knowing that Microraptor was likely glossy black does not make it less interesting. It makes the animal more specific. Knowing that Borealopelta was reddish-brown and countershaded does not reduce the mystery. It places the mystery in a real pattern. The more evidence we have, the less generic the ancient world becomes. The dinosaur age was never generic. Only our evidence was incomplete. The word feather can be misleading because it suggests the finished object on a modern bird's wing. But feathers have a history, and the earliest feather-like structures were probably much simpler. A filament is not a flight feather. A downy covering is not a wing. A bristle is not a tail fan. The fossil record shows a sequence of forms, though not a neat ladder. Evolution works by branching, retaining, modifying, and repurposing. Simple filaments could provide insulation. Branched filaments could trap more air. Veined feathers could form surfaces. Asymmetrical veined feathers could aid flight or controlled movement through air. But these features did not evolve all at once, and they did not evolve for a single purpose. In different dinosaur lineages, feather-like structures may have served different roles at the same time. This matters for interpreting animals like Sinosauropteryx, Anchiornis, Microraptor, Caudipteryx, and other feathered dinosaurs. Some were clearly not capable of powered flight. Some may have glided or used wings for maneuvering. Some had feathers too symmetrical or too ornamental for efficient flight. If we ask only whether feathers were for flying, we miss the longer history of what feathers did before flight became dominant in birds. A feather lying flat in stone is easy to detach from the living body. In life, it grew from skin. It had a follicle. It was nourished while developing and then became a dead structure carried by the body. It could break, wear, molt, and be replaced. It had orientation, flexibility, and relation to neighboring feathers. It sat within a living surface, not on top of it like a glued ornament. Caudipteryx shows one of the strangest combinations to modern eyes. It was a small oviraptorosaur with feathers, including prominent tail feathers and arm feathers, but it was not a flying animal. Its body plan suggests a ground-dwelling dinosaur. The feathers likely had roles in display, balance, brooding, or signaling. The animal looked bird-like in some features and unmistakably non-bird in others. Oviraptorosaurs as a group show many bird-like traits, including beaks in some forms, feathers, and nesting postures. Fossils of adults associated with nests suggest that at least some species brooded eggs in a bird-like manner, though the details varied. Feathers may have helped cover eggs or display to mates. Again, the function was not single. A structure useful for display can also help with temperature regulation. A structure useful for brooding can also signal fitness. We cannot watch these animals behave. We infer from posture, anatomy, comparison with living animals, and context. A brooding fossil does not show an entire reproductive cycle. A feather fan does not tell us exactly how it was used, but the convergence of evidence allows cautious reconstruction. The more fossils preserve surfaces, the more behavior becomes accessible. A nest with an adult above it is a quiet image, the animal's body curved around eggs, limbs folded, feathers perhaps spread over the clutch or arranged around it. Sediment enters the scene at the end, not the beginning. A collapse, a storm, a burial event. What remains is posture and proximity. The tenderness, if there was tenderness, is not fossilized, but the arrangement remains. Feathers also create the possibility of threat display. A small theropod could raise feathers to appear larger. Tail feathers could fan. Arm feathers could spread. A crest could lift. Modern birds use posture and plumage to signal aggression, alarm, courtship, and territoriality. It would be strange if feathered dinosaurs, with similar structures and often good vision, did not use them visually. This does not require turning dinosaurs into modern birds with different names. It simply recognizes that anatomical structures create behavioral possibilities. If a dinosaur had a tail fan, that fan could be seen. If it had contrasting colors, those colors could be displayed. If it had iridescent plumage, light angle mattered. Behavior is not preserved directly, but the body tells us what behaviors were possible. Some feathers may have affected movement before they produced flight. A small animal leaping between branches or down slopes could use feathered limbs to slow descent. Wing-assisted incline running has been studied in living birds, where developing wings help young birds scramble up steep surfaces. Similar behaviors have been proposed for some feathered dinosaurs, though evidence remains debated. The origin of flight is not the main subject here, but it cannot be entirely separated from feathers. The same structures that began as insulation or display eventually became aerodynamic surfaces. Archaeopteryx, Microraptor, and other paravians show the complexity of this transition. Flight may not have had a single origin pathway. Gliding, leaping, running, climbing, flapping, and display may all have contributed in different lineages. Before a wing is a wing, it is an arm with feathers. Before flight is flight, there are smaller movements. A leap that travels farther. A fall that slows. A turn that becomes more controlled. A display that spreads the feathers wide. Evolution does not announce when a structure crosses from one category into another. It simply keeps the variations that work. The feathers of large dinosaurs remain a more difficult question. Some tyrannosauroids, especially early or smaller forms, show evidence of filamentous coverings. Eutyrannus, a large early tyrannosauroid from the early Cretaceous, preserved long filamentous feathers. This shows that relatively large theropods could be feathered, but later giant tyrannosaurids also preserved scaly skin impressions on parts of the body, suggesting a more complex pattern of retention and loss. Large body size changes insulation needs. A small animal loses heat quickly and benefits from covering. A giant animal retains heat more effectively and may face overheating in warm climates. This does not mean large dinosaurs could not have feathers. It means feathers may have been reduced, localized, seasonal, or more important in juveniles than adults. The evidence does not support one simple image for all tyrannosaurs. Imagine a juvenile tyrannosaur in a northern Cretaceous forest with a fuzzy body covering that thins as it grows, or a large adult with feathers along the back, neck, or display regions but scales on the feet and snout. These remain plausible possibilities depending on lineage and environment, but they are not equally supported for every species. The fossil evidence decides where confidence is possible. The temptation is to ask whether Tyrannosaurus rex was feathered, as if the answer should be yes or no. The better question is where, when, how much, at what age, and in what population. A living animal's surface is not a referendum. It is a body with regions. The same caution applies to skin impressions from any one part of a dinosaur. A patch of scaly tail does not prove the head lacked feathers. A patch of feathered torso does not prove the feet lacked scales. Preservation is local. Interpretation must be local before it becomes general. Paleontologists use phylogenetic bracketing to help with this. If close relatives have feathers, a fossil without preserved skin may be reconstructed with feathers if the relationship supports it. If close relatives preserve scales in certain regions, that evidence matters too. The method is careful inference from evolutionary relationships, not random decoration. This is why dinosaur restorations now vary more than they once did. Some animals are shown with full feather coverings, some with sparse filaments, some with scaly bodies and feathered regions, some with bare faces, beaks, keratin sheaths, or bristles. The variety can feel confusing, but it reflects a more mature science. The old uniformity was easier because it ignored evidence. A living Mesozoic landscape would have settled the argument instantly. One walk through a Jurassic forest would show what no paper can fully reconstruct. A small feathered animal crossing a log, a scaly sauropod calf pushing through ferns, a bristled ornithischian near the undergrowth, a glossy paravian in a tree, a hadrosaur herd with textured hide and soft tissue outlines. All of them dinosaurs, none of them identical. The fossil record gives us pieces of that walk. A feather here, a scale there, a skin envelope around a carcass, a microscopic pigment body, a trackway in mud. Each piece is partial, but together they have changed the entire surface of the dinosaur age. Dinosaurs did not rule the Mesozoic as bare skeletons. They moved through it clothed in skin, scales, armor, keratin, feather, color, and shadow. A dinosaur mummy is often described as if it were preserved whole, but the more precise image is a set of surviving surfaces. A flank, a foot, a tail, a neck, a patch along the ribs, a skin envelope, a clay film. These surfaces can be spectacular, yet they are uneven. They show that the living body had texture, but they do not always show the full distribution of that texture. For that, scientists compare many specimens. Hadrosaurs are unusually generous in this regard. Because they were common, large, and lived in environments where floodplain burial could occur, they have produced several important skin fossils. Their skin impressions often show a mosaic of small scales, but some regions include larger feature scales or differently shaped patches. This suggests that the body surface was not uniform. The neck, torso, limbs, tail, and belly could differ. In a living animal, different regions face different mechanical demands. The belly may need flexibility. The feet need durability. The tail may be involved in balance, display, or fat storage. The joints need skin that can fold without tearing. The back receives more sunlight than the underside. If color or scale pattern varied across the body, those variations may reflect function, not random ornament. The underside is one of the hardest places to see in fossils because it is often crushed, hidden, or destroyed. Yet the underside matters. It is where countershading would become pale. It is where the body nearly touched mud when the animal lay down. It is where heat and moisture could be trapped. It is where a predator attacking from below or a scavenger opening the abdomen would encounter the animal first after death. The recently described Edmontosaurus preservation through clay templating is important because it suggests that some external surfaces can be preserved as extremely thin sediment films. These films are not soft tissue in the ordinary sense. They are geological copies formed at the boundary between decaying body and surrounding sediment. Their existence means paleontologists may need to look more carefully at surfaces that might otherwise be dismissed as ordinary matrix. A clay film only a fraction of a millimeter thick can carry the shape of a scale. That is difficult to hold in the mind. The difference between ignorance and detail can be thinner than a fingernail. A fossil preparator removing too much rock could erase it. A collector who sees only bones might miss it. A quarry worker might split the wrong surface and destroy a map of the animal's skin. Preparation is therefore part of discovery. Many exceptional fossils reveal their importance slowly under laboratory tools. Air scribes, needles, consolidants, microscopes, CT scans, and careful lighting can expose features that the field jacket concealed. A dinosaur mummy is not simply found. It is uncovered in stages. The first discovery may happen in the Badlands, but the second happens under controlled light on a preparation table. There is patience in that work. A preparator follows the edge of skin where it passes into stone. They stop before the texture is lost. They learn the difference between bone, matrix, mineral stain, and preserved surface by touch and sight. A mistake can remove 100 million years of detail in a second. The fossil asks for slowness. Some of the most important information comes from what looks least dramatic. The end of a toe. The surface of a hand. A crease near the hip. A row of raised scales along the tail. These features rarely appear in old skeletal reconstructions because bones do not predict them well. Mummies can reveal soft ridges, flaps, pads, and coverings that change how an animal walked or looked. Feet are especially important. Dinosaur trackways are abundant in some formations, but track interpretation depends on understanding soft tissue. A skeletal foot is not the same as a footprint maker. Pads, claws, hooves, skin folds, and sediment behavior all shape the final print. A preserved foot covering in a hadrosaur can help explain why some tracks look broader, smoother, or less digit-defined than the bones alone would suggest. Trackways also preserve behavior over a span of seconds or minutes. A mummy preserves anatomy in death. Together, they create a fuller picture. A hadrosaur foot with hoof-like coverings helps interpret prints along a river margin. A trackway showing group movement helps place that foot into social behavior. A skin impression near the ankle shows the surface that flexed above the print. Different fossils speak across categories. Some dinosaur tracks preserve skin impressions within the print itself. When the foot pressed into very fine mud and lifted cleanly, the underside texture could be stamped into the sediment. These are rare, but they are extraordinary. They preserve not the skin on a dead body, but the skin of a living foot during movement. A moment of pressure becomes anatomy. Such a track is almost intimate. The animal was alive when it made it. Its weight entered the mud. The footpad spread. The texture touched sediment. The limb lifted. Then sunlight, drying, burial, and time did the rest. The fossil is not a corpse. It is contact. Track skin impressions must be interpreted cautiously because mud can distort patterns. Sediment may crack, slide, or adhere to the foot. A print can be overstepped, eroded, or infilled. Still, when preservation is clear, the underside of a dinosaur foot can be studied in a way body fossils rarely allow. It is another route to the external animal. Skin can also inform posture. If preserved soft tissue shows how limbs were enclosed, or how the tail base was shaped, reconstructions can adjust muscle volume and body outline. For hadrosaurs, soft tissue along the back or tail may indicate ridges not predicted from bones alone. For theropods, soft tissue around the face remains debated, including the extent of lips or oral coverings in different lineages. Dinosaur faces are among the most difficult surfaces to reconstruct because they carry so much soft anatomy and so much public expectation. Teeth, jaws, nostrils, beaks, keratin sheaths, lips, cheeks, display skin, and muscle all affect the living head. A skull can show openings and attachment points, but it does not automatically show the complete face. Hadrosaurs had beaks at the front of their jaws and complex dental batteries farther back. Ceratopsians had strong beaks and tooth rows for processing plants. Ornithomimosaurs had beaks. Oviraptorosaurs had beaks. Theropod mouths varied widely, from slender-toothed fish-eaters to bone-crushing giants. Each mouth had soft tissue and keratin that shaped feeding in appearance. Keratin is a major missing material. It covered beaks, claws, horn cores, some armor, and possibly other display structures. In fossils, bone may preserve the base, while the keratin covering is lost. A horn core without its sheath underestimates the full horn. A beak bone without keratin does not show the true edge of the mouth. Mummies and exceptional preservation sometimes reveal the absent layer. In life, keratin would have worn, cracked, grown, and polished with use. A beak edge scraping plants, a claw dragging through soil, a horn sheath rubbing against another animal, armor sheaths catching dust. These surfaces were not static. They recorded the life of the individual in small marks that mostly vanished before fossilization. When paleontology restores skin and keratin, it restores the animal's contact with the world. The bones show possibility. The surface shows experience. A claw is not just a bone, it is the cutting structure that touched bark, soil, prey, or another body. A beak is not just a jaw, it is the edge that cropped plants or handled food. A foot is not just digits, it is the weight-bearing interface with the ground. This is why the fossil secrets in skin are not merely cosmetic. They change movement, feeding, defense, display, and ecology. They return the dinosaur to touch. The colors of feathers and skin belong to another layer of the same problem. A skeleton can show that an animal had a tail. Feathers can show that the tail had a fan. Melanosomes can suggest that the fan was dark, pale, rufous, banded, or iridescent. Suddenly, the tail is not just a counterweight or aerodynamic surface, it is a visible object moving through a habitat. In living birds, tail patterns can signal species, sex, age, condition, or mood. They can flash during escape, confuse predators, guide mates, or help maintain contact in groups. Some functions may have existed in non-avian dinosaurs as well, but scientists cannot assign them casually. The safe conclusion is that a patterned or brightly contrasting feathered tail likely had visual significance in addition to any mechanical role. Anchiornis, with its patterned body and limb feathers, suggests that complex visual signaling existed among small feathered dinosaurs before the full modern bird radiation. Its forelimb and hind limb feathers formed striking arrangements. Even if some details of color reconstruction change, the broad fact remains: this animal had a visually patterned plumage. Its body was not a plain prototype waiting to become a bird. It was already visually specialized. A small animal does not need to be enormous to be important in its world. It can be the size of a chicken and still carry signals that matter. It can move under low branches, leap from a log, flatten against bark, flare feathers at a rival, or vanish into shadow. The fossil slab makes it still. The pattern implies motion. The interpretation of display is always difficult because display behavior rarely fossilizes. A structure that looks ornamental to us may have had aerodynamic, thermoregulatory, tactile, or protective functions. Feathers are especially multifunctional. A crest can attract a mate, identify species, shed water, or help with visual communication at close range. Evolution often keeps features because they solve several problems at once. Structural color deepens the difficulty. Iridescence depends on nanometer-scale arrangements. In modern birds, the same pigment can look different depending on how melanosomes are arranged within feather barbules. A black feather can become glossy blue. A dark surface can flash green. The color is not only in the pigment, but in the architecture of the feather. Fossils that preserve melanosome arrangement can therefore reveal not just darkness, but sheen. Microraptor's inferred iridescence is one of the strongest examples. Its narrow melanosomes resemble those associated with iridescent black feathers in living birds. This suggests a glossy plumage, not just a dark one. The animal may have been visually striking, especially under direct light. That has implications for activity and display, though it does not settle every behavioral question. Imagine the animal at the edge of a Cretaceous lake forest after rain. The branches are wet. The leaves hold droplets. The small dinosaur shifts its feathered limbs, and for a moment, the black surface catches light as blue. Then it moves again, and the color collapses into darkness. A predator, a rival, or a mate might see that flash differently from us. The fossil can only point toward it. Some colors will never be recovered because they were not stored in durable structures. A bright red patch from carotenoids might vanish. A yellow beak sheath could leave no clear chemical trace. A blue produced by delicate air keratin structure might collapse during fossilization. A living dinosaur could have been more colorful than its fossil melanosomes suggest, and sometimes less. The fossil is evidence, not a complete visual inventory. Paleocolor also depends on sampling. If only one feather or one region is sampled, scientists cannot reconstruct the whole animal. A dark feather on the wing does not mean the head was dark. A reddish region on the back does not mean the belly matched. Whole body reconstructions require many samples across different regions, preserved well enough for comparison. That is why Anchiornis was so important. It allowed a map rather than a single note. Color maps can reveal patterns that bones never could. A crest may be brighter than the body. Wings may have stripes. Legs may carry contrasting feathers. A tail may be banded. A back may grade into a pale underside. These patterns are not random decoration. In living animals, pattern edges and contrasts often align with behavior, camouflage, or display. Paleontology can begin to ask similar questions for extinct animals. Camouflage is not always dull. A patterned animal can be bright in one context and hidden in another. Stripes can disrupt outlines. Spots can mimic broken light. Countershading can flatten shape. Dark eye stripes can reduce glare or hide the eye. A tailband can draw attention away from the body. Without knowing the habitat and viewer, color cannot be understood fully. A dinosaur's color existed in a place. Under conifer shade. In open floodplain light. Against red mud, pale sand, dark water, fern green, ash gray, or snow at high latitudes. It changed when the animal moved from sunlight to shadow. It changed when the feathers ruffled. It changed when the skin was wet. A fossil color reconstruction is only the beginning of seeing it. High-latitude dinosaurs raise special questions. The Mesozoic poles were not like modern polar ice worlds, but they still experienced extreme seasonal light. Long summer days and winter darkness would have affected plants, behavior, and perhaps coloration. Insulation may have mattered more. Visual signals may have operated under different light regimes. The fossil record from polar regions is improving, but soft tissue preservation remains limited. Think of a feathered dinosaur in a Cretaceous polar forest, not on ice under a permanent blizzard, but under months of low light and seasonal cold. The trees are not modern spruce, but conifers, ginkgos, ferns, and later flowering plants depending on time and place. The animal's covering is not an aesthetic feature, it is part of surviving latitude, season, and darkness. Skin without feathers could also respond to climate. Scale size, skin thickness, blood flow, fat distribution, and behavior all affect thermal balance. Large dinosaurs may have used shade, posture, water, or activity timing to manage heat. Some may have had display structures that also exchanged heat, though such interpretations must be tested anatomically. The surface mediates the body's relationship with temperature. Stegosaurus plates, for example, have been discussed as possible display structures, thermoregulatory surfaces, or both. They are not skin in the same way a hadrosaur hide is skin, but they were part of the external appearance, probably covered in keratin or other soft tissue. Blood vessel traces in the plates have contributed to debates about function. Like many structures, they may have served more than one role. A row of plates rising above a Jurassic back would have changed the animal's outline long before a predator or mate came close. The plates caught light. They cast shadows. They may have flushed or changed in appearance if blood flow varied. They made the animal visible from the side, not because a skeleton required it, but because evolution produced a surface that could be seen. Ankylosaurs and nodosaurs took external structure in another direction. Armor turned the body into terrain. Plates, spikes, scutes, and sheaths broke up the outline and defended the animal from teeth. Borealopelta shows that even such armor could carry pigment. The armored surface was not a neutral shield. It was part of visual ecology. Ceratopsian frills and horns also carried missing surfaces. The bone shows shape, but living horn sheaths and skin could have changed the profile and color. Frills may have supported display patterns in some species, though direct color evidence is rare. Blood vessels, surface texture, and comparison with living horned animals suggest possibilities, but the actual colors of Triceratops and many relatives remain unknown. The lack of preserved color does not mean lack of color. Triceratops could have been plain, patterned, dull, bright in certain regions, sexually dimorphic, seasonally variable, or different across growth stages. The fossil evidence currently supports some statements about skull structure and keratin, but far fewer about color. A responsible reconstruction can be vivid while admitting uncertainty. This is where lost colors remain truly lost. The broad frill of a ceratopsian under Cretaceous sun, the eye ring of a hadrosaur, the throat skin of a small theropod, the face of a young tyrannosaur, the display patch of an over-aptorosaur. Some of these may never be known. They existed for other animals, and then they ended. The mystery is not failure. It is part of the subject. Paleontology does not bring the Mesozoic back whole. It recovers pieces with enough precision to make the absence meaningful. The known colors reveal that unknown colors must have been everywhere. The stone keeps some surfaces and refuses others. It gives a striped tail, a dark wing, a reddish armored back, a pebbled hide. Then it closes again. The fossil record of skin also changes how we imagine dinosaur movement. A scaly hide is not just a pattern on a still body. It has to bend when the animal turns, stretch when muscles contract, and fold where joints close. On a living dinosaur, skin would have been in constant motion. The fossil gives the pattern after motion has ended, but the pattern came from a body that walked, fed, rested, fought, displayed, and fled. Hadrosaurs were capable, mobile herbivores. Their skeletons suggest animals that could move on all fours during slow feeding and perhaps shift to bipedal movement during faster locomotion. The soft tissue of the hands and feet affects this interpretation because contact with the ground depends on pads, coverings, and posture. A hoof-like structure changes how weight passes through the limb. A hadrosaur hand was not a human-like grasping hand. It was part of a weight-bearing forelimb in many situations, with digits enclosed or supported by soft tissue. The mummified evidence of hoof-like coverings gives a firmer external shape to what the bones only imply. The animal's forelimbs were not delicate props. They were part of a large quadrupedal stance, especially during feeding and slow movement. When the animal lowered its head to crop plants, the forelimbs took weight. The back shifted. The skin along the shoulder wrinkled. The foot coverings pressed into soil. The tail balanced behind. A skeleton can show the arc of the spine and the length of the limbs, but skin and pads make the posture feel inhabited. Skin can also record injury, though rarely. Scars in fossilized skin are difficult to identify, but healed bone injuries are more common. Bite marks, infections, fractures, and healed trauma show that dinosaurs survived accidents and attacks. When skin is preserved near damaged regions, scientists may ask whether the surface shows distortion or response. Usually it does not preserve enough, but the possibility matters. Fossil bones have shown healed bites from predators, tail injuries, infections, arthritis-like conditions, and broken ribs. These are not soft tissue secrets, but they remind us that skin covered animals with histories. A scarred dinosaur would have carried visible marks during life. Fights, predator encounters, parasites, and disease may have left external signs that vanished with the soft tissue. Predation-shaped surfaces. Armor evolved because teeth existed. Camouflage mattered because eyes existed. Herding may have changed how visible markings worked. Display structures evolved because other members of the species responded to them. Skin, feathers, and color were not passive coverings. They were part of an arms race and a social world. The arms race should not be exaggerated into constant combat. Dinosaurs spent most of their lives not fighting. They fed, moved, rested, grew, reproduced, and avoided danger when possible. A hadrosaur did not spend every moment being chased by Tyrannosaurus. A Borealopelta did not live as a battle machine. But the possibility of predation shaped their bodies over evolutionary time. A calm animal can still carry defenses. A resting nodosaur under the shade of low trees is still armored. A feeding hadrosaur still has a powerful tail and strong limbs. A small feathered theropod grooming itself on a branch still carries claws. Evolution builds for moments that may be rare, but decisive. Grooming is another behavior implied by feathers. Modern birds spend large parts of their day maintaining plumage. Feathers that are dirty, broken, or misaligned lose function. If feathered dinosaurs carried complex plumage, some form of preening or maintenance was likely, though direct evidence is sparse. Beaks, teeth, claws, or rubbing behavior could have helped keep the covering functional. This brings parasites into the picture. Feathers and skin create habitats for smaller organisms. Mites, lice like insects, flies, ticks, and other arthropods interacted with Mesozoic animals. Amber has preserved ancient insects and even feathers, sometimes with parasites or traces of ecological association. The surface of a dinosaur was not empty. It was part of a miniature ecosystem. Amber is not the main source for dinosaur mummies, but it can preserve feathers and small fragments of the Mesozoic surface world. Feathers trapped in amber show microscopic detail and sometimes color-related structures. Some amber pieces have even preserved parts of small animals, including a feathered dinosaur tail described from Cretaceous amber, though such fossils require careful study and sometimes come with ethical and provenance concerns. Provenance matters in paleontology. A fossil's scientific value depends on knowing where it came from, how old it is, and whether it was collected legally and ethically. A beautiful fossil without reliable context can lose much of its scientific meaning. This is especially important for exceptional soft tissue fossils, which can be commercially valuable and vulnerable to poor documentation. A dinosaur mummy removed without context is like a sentence torn from a book. It may still be striking, but the surrounding information is gone. The sediment, layer, associated fossils, orientation, taphonomy, and environment all help interpret what happened. Fossils are not isolated objects, they are geological events. In the field, context can look ordinary. A layer of gray clay, a channel sand, a thin ash bed, a scattering of plant fragments, the angle of a rib, the relationship between skin and bone. These details may not appear in a display case, but they are part of the fossil's meaning. The dinosaur is preserved with its circumstances. The circumstances of preservation often decide what kind of external anatomy survives. Fine lake mud can preserve feather outlines, floodplain clay can template skin, marine anoxia can protect an armored carcass, volcanic ash can bury small bodies quickly, dry exposure can stiffen skin before burial. Each pathway produces a different kind of evidence, and each pathway distorts the body in different ways. This is why paleontologists sometimes recreate decay in controlled experiments. By observing how modern carcasses decompose, dry, bloat, collapse, and interact with sediment, they can better understand fossil mummies. No modern carcass is a dinosaur, but decay has physical and biological rules. Experiments can show how skin moves after death, how scavenging changes preservation, and how microbial films affect surfaces. Such experiments have helped challenge the assumption that mummified skin always means rapid burial. A carcass can be exposed, scavenged, dried, and still preserve skin impressions if burial and sediment chemistry occur at the right time. This makes the fossil record less tidy but more realistic. Exceptional preservation may come from a sequence of messy events rather than a single perfect catastrophe. Death is rarely neat in nature. A body may dry on one side and rot on the other. It may be opened by scavengers, then flooded. It may lie in sun, then underwater. It may lose its internal organs before its outer skin is copied. A mummy is not necessarily a peaceful burial. It can be a record of disturbance that still preserved the surface. That matters because the fossil's beauty can hide the violence of its formation. The pebbled skin of a hadrosaur may have passed through bloating, collapse, insect activity, microbial growth, and flood burial. The armor of Borealopelta may have traveled as a floating carcass before sinking. The feather halo of a small theropod may have been made possible by sudden ash and lake chemistry. Preservation is not gentleness. It is survival through processes that usually destroy. The ancient world did not intend to save these animals. It simply failed to erase them completely. Once the surfaces are preserved, another kind of reconstruction begins. A paleontologist has to decide how much flesh to put back around the bones. Too little, and the animal becomes shrink-wrapped, with every skull opening visible as a hollow depression and every muscle reduced to a tight line. Too much, and the reconstruction floats away from evidence. Skin fossils help hold the middle ground. Shrink-wrapping became common in some older reconstructions because bones were treated as close guides to the outer surface. In living animals, this is often wrong. A bird's skull looks nothing like its feathered head. A hippo skull does not predict the full face. A horse skull lacks the nostrils, lips, and soft tissue that make the living head recognizable. Dinosaur skulls also had soft outlines that bones alone do not show. Skin impressions do not solve every problem, but they provide checkpoints. If a hadrosaur mummy preserves a soft crest, then a skull without a bony crest cannot be assumed to have had no head ornament. If a foot preserves broad coverings, track interpretations change. If armor sheaths are preserved, the size and shape of spikes are adjusted. Each fossil surface becomes a constraint on future restorations. The living dinosaur was thicker than its skeleton. Its neck had muscles and vessels. Its tail had tendons, fat, and skin. Its face had soft tissue around openings. Its feet had pads and coverings. Its body changed after meals, injury, age, and season. A museum mount is elegant because it is stripped of all this. The animal was not stripped. Paleoartists now work closer to paleontologists than ever before. A modern reconstruction may begin with a skeletal drawing, then add muscles based on attachment scars and living relatives, then add soft tissue volumes, skin, feathers, color patterns, and habitat. Exceptional fossils provide direct guidance. Where evidence is missing, artists use careful inference rather than empty invention. The result is not one final image of a dinosaur, but a range of evidence-based possibilities. This is healthy. Scientific art changes as science changes. The diplodocus of one generation, tail dragging in a swamp, gives way to an active terrestrial animal with a lifted tail. The scaly raptor of one generation gives way to a feathered dromaeosaur. The gray-armored dinosaur gains reddish-brown countershading. These are not fashion changes, they are evidence changes. Popular culture often lags behind. Film dinosaurs, toys, and old illustrations can remain powerful even after science moves on. The public image of a dinosaur is not built only from papers. It is built from childhood books, museum halls, cinema, logos, and memory. Skin and feather discoveries have to compete with images that are emotionally familiar. This is why an actual fossil surface can be persuasive in a way words are not. A feathered slab does not argue loudly. A skin impression does not demand a theory. It simply exists. The viewer sees the texture and understands that the old image was incomplete. The animal had an outside, and part of it is here. Still, there is a danger in replacing one certainty with another too quickly. Not every theropod should be drawn like a hawk. Not every large dinosaur needs bright colors. Not every scale patch should erase feathers. The best reconstructions keep the evidence visible. They distinguish what is known from what is plausible and what is speculative. A good dinosaur restoration is therefore a kind of argument. It says, here is the skeleton. Here are the preserved surfaces. Here are the living relatives. Here is the environment. Here are the uncertainties. The final image may look seamless, but behind it is a chain of choices. Skin, feathers, and color are among the most delicate choices because they carry the greatest visual impact. Consider Tyrannosaurus. Its skull is intensely studied. Its bite, growth, senses, and biomechanics are debated in detail, yet the exact external appearance remains partly uncertain. Skin impressions from tyrannosaurids suggest scales in some regions. Related earlier tyrannosauroids show feather-like coverings. Large body size changes thermoregulation. The result is not a simple yes or no answer, but a spectrum of possibilities with stronger and weaker support. For some species, especially those with direct preservation, the reconstruction can be narrower. Microraptor can be shown with long feathers and likely glossy dark plumage. Sinosauropteryx can be shown with filamentous covering and a banded tail. Borealopelta can be shown with armor, preserved sheaths, and reddish-brown countershading. Edmontosaurus can be shown with pebbled skin and certain soft tissue structures where supported. The closer the fossil comes to the surface, the less generic the animal becomes. A dinosaur with a known color pattern cannot be swapped easily with another. A dinosaur with a preserved foot covering has a particular way of touching ground. A dinosaur with bristles along the tail has a silhouette that belongs to it. Specificity is a kind of resurrection, though an incomplete one. This is also why scientific names matter. They prevent the word dinosaur from becoming a blur. Borealopelta is not simply an armored dinosaur. Edmontosaurus is not simply a duckbill. Microraptor is not simply a raptor. Sinosauropteryx is not simply a small theropod. Each name attaches evidence to an animal, and each animal lived in a particular place and time. The Mesozoic was not populated by types. It was populated by species, individuals, ages, sexes, injuries, colors, and movements. The fossil record rarely gives us all of that, but exceptional preservation lets a few individuals step forward with unusual clarity. Individuality is one of the quiet secrets of mummies. A skeleton can represent a species. A skin mummy can feel like a body. It may preserve asymmetry, damage, wrinkles, the exact arrangement of scales, or the result of that individual's death. It is still a specimen, studied scientifically, but it also carries the fact that this was one animal, not an average. Paleontology often has to generalize from individuals. One fossil can define a species. One preserved patch can influence reconstructions of a lineage. This is necessary, but it requires caution. An individual may be unusual. It may be young, old, diseased, injured, male, female, seasonally changed, or preserved in a distorted posture. More specimens help test whether a feature was typical. That is why new mummies are so valuable. They do not merely add another beautiful fossil. They allow comparison. Do two Edmontosaurus specimens show the same kind of foot covering? Do scale patterns repeat? Does a soft crest appear consistently? Are differences related to growth? With each specimen, the surface becomes less anecdotal and more anatomical. The same is true for feather color. One Anchiornis specimen can reveal a pattern, but more specimens can show variation. Did all individuals have the same crest color? Did juveniles differ? Did males and females differ? Did seasons change plumage? Fossils rarely answer these questions, but they define the next questions. Science often advances by replacing a large mystery with smaller ones. At first, the question is whether dinosaur colors can be known at all. Then, one color is recovered. Then the question becomes how accurate it is, how widespread it was, whether it varied by age, whether it changed by season, whether it meant display or camouflage. The mystery has not vanished. It has become more precise. There is a kind of generosity in that. The fossil record gives enough to move forward, but not enough to exhaust the ancient world. A dinosaur mummy can reveal scales and still hide behavior. A feather can reveal color and still hide sound, smell, and motion. The past becomes clearer without becoming small. That is the right scale for the dinosaur age. Not complete darkness, and not full daylight. A landscape seen through openings in stone. The topic also reaches into the plants around the dinosaurs, because color and skin only make sense against backgrounds. A green animal in a conifer forest is not the same as a green animal on a red desert plain. A striped tail in fern understory works differently from a striped tail on open mud. The Mesozoic was full of habitats, and each habitat created its own visual problems. In the Jurassic, many landscapes were dominated by conifers, cycads, ginkgos, ferns, horsetails, and seed ferns. Flowering plants were absent or not yet ecologically dominant. By the Cretaceous, angiosperms diversified and changed many ecosystems. Hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, ankylosaurs, tyrannosaurs, and many feathered theropods lived in worlds where flowering plants were increasingly important, especially in the late Cretaceous. These plant changes affected the visual environment. Leaves differed in shape and density. Forest floors changed. Flowering shrubs and trees introduced new structures and eventually new relationships with insects. Open floodplains, coastal wetlands, upland forests, and seasonal woodlands all offered different patterns of light and cover. A dinosaur's surface evolved within these settings. A banded tail moving through cycads is a different signal than the same tail moving through tall flowering shrubs. A dark back under a conifer canopy is different from a dark back under open Cretaceous sun. A pale belly above reflected sand is different from a pale belly over black mud. The fossil gives the animal. The environment gives the stage. This is why some paleocolor studies model light conditions. If a countershading pattern matches a forest light environment, that can suggest the animal lived among vegetation rather than on an open plain. This does not replace sedimentology, plant fossils, or associated fauna. It adds another line of evidence. Color becomes a clue to habitat. In Psittacosaurus, the countershading pattern was analyzed in relation to lighting environments, supporting a forested habitat interpretation. In Borealopelta, countershading in a large, armored animal suggested strong predation pressure despite its defenses. These studies show that color can inform ecology. It is not only about appearance in a painting, it can speak to where and how the animal lived. But color evidence should be integrated with other data. Sediments reveal rivers, lakes, deserts, floodplains, or seas. Plant fossils show vegetation. Isotopies can suggest climate or diet. Trackways show movement across surfaces. Associated fossils show community composition. Color alone cannot reconstruct an ecosystem. It is one thread woven into a larger fabric. Fossil secrets rarely speak alone. A scale patch needs a skeleton. A feather needs a phylogenetic context. A pigment signal needs chemistry. A quarry needs geology. A track needs sediment behavior. A mummy needs taphonomy. Each piece strengthens the others when they point in the same direction. The late Cretaceous floodplains of North America provide one of the richest settings for these questions. Here, Edmontosaurus moved among channels, forests, wetlands, and open areas near the end of the dinosaur age. Tyrannosaurus hunted or scavenged. Triceratops browsed. Ankylosaurus carried heavy armor. Crocodiliforms waded in water. Turtles, fish, mammals, birds, insects, and plants filled the background. In such a place, the skin of Edmontosaurus had to do many ordinary things. It had to protect the animal from scratches as it pushed through vegetation. It had to resist insects. It had to allow growth. It had to cover powerful muscles along the tail and limbs. It had to help manage water loss and temperature. If it carried color patterns, those patterns worked among river light and floodplain shade. Hadrosaurs are sometimes called duck-billed dinosaurs because of the broad shape at the front of the mouth, but the nickname can make them seem gentler and simpler than they were. These were large, successful, complex herbivores with sophisticated chewing systems, social possibilities, and wide distributions. Their mummies reveal that their external anatomy was equally specialized in places, including skin textures and foot coverings. The dental batteries of hadrosaurs allowed efficient processing of tough plant material. Their jaws and teeth formed grinding surfaces that were replaced continuously as they wore down. This feeding system supported large body size and possibly herding populations. Skin and soft tissue complete the picture by showing the body that carried that feeding machine across the landscape. A feeding hadrosaur is not a static silhouette. The jaw works. The cheeks or soft tissues around the mouth hold plant material. The neck shifts. The front of the body lowers. The forefeet take weight. The tail extends. The skin along the flank stretches with breath. Scales near the shoulder move over muscle. Dust rises where the feet settle. A predator watching such a herd would see surfaces, not skeletons. It would see the movement of backs, tails, bellies, juveniles, and adults. It would see color and shadow. It would see vulnerable edges. If the herd moved suddenly, the visual field would become a confusion of bodies. Skin, pattern, and group behavior may have worked together. We cannot claim specific herd color patterns without evidence. But we can say that living social animals often use visual cues for recognition, cohesion, or display. Hadrosaurs had good senses, and complex behavior is plausible for many species. Preserved skin gives the surface, behavior remains inferred. The connection is suggestive rather than certain. Ceratopsians occupied some of the same late Cretaceous worlds. Their frills and horns may have functioned in display, species recognition, combat, thermoregulation, or combinations of these. Soft tissue and keratin would have altered the appearance of the skull. If frills carried color patterns, those patterns are mostly unknown, yet the structure itself shows that visual communication likely mattered. A Triceratops skull in a museum is already powerful, but it is incomplete in the way all skulls are incomplete. The living frill had skin, the horns had sheaths, the eyes had lids and surrounding tissue. The nostrils opened into soft anatomy. Mud could stain the lower jaw. Scratches could mark the horn surface. The animal's face was not bone-colored. Ankylosaurs and nodosaurs also shared Cretaceous landscapes. Their armor is preserved more often than skin because osteoderms are bone. But Borealopelta shows how much more there was to see: sheaths, scale fields, pigment distribution, and body contour. It turns armored dinosaurs from walking collections of plates into living surfaces with color and camouflage. For theropods, the Cretaceous surface world was split among many forms. Some large predators were scaly in preserved regions. Some smaller relatives were feathered. Ornithomimosaurs, oviraptorosaurs, dromaeosaurids, troodontids, and early birds carried varied plumage. A single ecosystem could include feathered hunters, scaly-bodied giants, beaked omnivores, and birds moving through the canopy. The result is a Cretaceous visual world that would not match older murals. It would not be a realm of uniformly dull reptiles, nor would it be a world where every dinosaur looked like a modern bird. It would be mixed. Scales and feathers, armor and beaks, bright display and camouflage, large bodies and small flashes of movement in trees. The truth is more interesting than either extreme. The dinosaur age had texture. There is another fossil secret hidden in the word color. Sometimes color tells us not what an animal was showing, but what it was hiding. Camouflage is easy to imagine as dullness, but in nature it is often precise. A body can be marked to match shadow. A flank can be modeled to break its outline. A tail can be banded so that movement distracts from the head. A back can be dark so that sunlight does not betray the shape. Countershading is one of the most widespread camouflage patterns in living animals. It is found in fish, reptiles, birds, and mammals. A darker upper surface and lighter lower surface can make the body less three-dimensional under overhead light. The pattern does not make an animal invisible, but it can delay detection. For prey, delay can be survival. For predators, delay can be a successful approach. Borealopelta's countershading is striking because it was not small and defenseless. It had armor. It had shoulder spikes. It had a low, heavy body. The evidence that it still used camouflage suggests predation pressure strong enough to shape even armored animals. This is one of the most important lessons of color evidence. It can reveal ecological pressure that bones alone might understate. An armored dinosaur standing still among vegetation may have looked like a broken piece of the landscape. Dark above, pale below, spikes and plates interrupting the outline. The animal lowers its head, and the back becomes part of the shaded ground behind it. A predator's eyes pass over it once, then again. Perhaps that was enough. For a small animal like Psittacosaurus, camouflage may have been even more important. Its countershaded body, tail bristles, and beaked face place it in a world of low vegetation and watchful predators. It did not need to fight like a ceratopsian giant. It needed to feed, grow, and avoid being noticed too soon. Color pattern becomes part of a survival strategy. Sinosauropteryx may also have used color patterns for camouflage. Its banded tail and possible facial markings have been interpreted in relation to open habitats and visual signaling. As always, interpretations must remain careful. A banded tail can serve display, camouflage, or both. In living animals, patterns often do more than one thing depending on context. Predators could also use camouflage. A small theropod moving through undergrowth might benefit from mottled feathers or stripes. A large predator approaching through broken shade could be helped by dull colors or disruptive patterns. We lack direct color evidence for most large predatory dinosaurs, but the ecological logic is clear. Predators are seen as well as seeing. Imagine a feathered hunter pausing at the edge of a fern thicket. Its body is low, its head turns, the feathers along its neck lie flat. Brown, gray, black, or reddish patterning would matter in that moment, not as beauty, but as delay. A prey animal that sees the hunter 1 second later may be one step too late. This does not mean every dinosaur was camouflaged. Many animals balance camouflage with display. A male bird can be bright during courtship and hidden in other contexts, or use bright patches that appear only when displayed. Some dinosaurs may have carried concealed signals, a tail fan folded most of the time, a crest visible only from certain angles, a throat patch shown during behavior. Fossils rarely capture posture-dependent color. Display is the other side of the color problem. If a dinosaur had a crest, plume, tail fan, iridescent feathers, or contrasting wing patches, Those structures could help individuals communicate. Species recognition matters in diverse ecosystems. Mate choice matters in sexual reproduction. Rivalry matters where animals compete. Color and shape can carry information faster than sound or scent in daylight environments. Hadrosaurs used cranial crests in some lineages, and those crests may have produced sound as well as visual signals. Ceratopsians evolved horns and frills. Oviraptorosaurs had crests and feathers. Dromaeosaurids had plumage. Even without knowing exact colors, these structures indicate that dinosaurs communicated through bodies. Color would have added another layer wherever it was present. The presence of melanin can also strengthen feathers. In living birds, darker feather regions often resist wear better because melanin can make keratin more durable. This means color can have mechanical consequences. A dark wingtip may not be merely visual. It may be more resistant to abrasion. Fossil color patterns may therefore reflect function in flight or movement as well as display. A feathered dinosaur brushing through branches, landing on rough bark, or spreading its limbs against wind would wear its feathers. Darkened regions might last longer. Pale regions might appear where strength mattered less, or where contrast mattered more. The color of a feather can be part of its engineering. The more closely we look, the less separate appearance becomes from survival. Color is not surface in the shallow sense. It is physics, chemistry, behavior, ecology, and evolution combined on the outside of the body. Dinosaurs were not colored after they evolved. Their color was part of how they evolved. Still, many reconstructions must remain plausible rather than proven. For dinosaurs without preserved pigments, artists often use modern analogs and ecological reasoning. Forest animals may be modeled. Open country animals may be countershaded. Social display structures may be more colorful. Large herbivores may be duller in some regions and patterned in others. These choices are not evidence in the same way fossil melanosomes are evidence, but they can be responsible when labeled as inference. There is room for both evidence and imagination, as long as they are not confused. A fossil tells us what survived. Imagination fills the living moment around it, but should leave the fossil visible underneath. Lost colors are therefore not empty gaps to be filled carelessly. They are questions. Was the frill plain or patterned? Did the juvenile differ from the adult? Did males and females look different? Did feathers molt into brighter breeding plumage? Did polar dinosaurs have seasonal coverings? Did armored dinosaurs use color to hide, warn, or identify? Each question waits for a fossil that may never come. The waiting is part of paleontology. A stone surface in a museum may answer a question that no one knew how to ask when it was collected. A drawer of feathers may hold microscopic structures not studied for decades. A quarry face may contain a skin film thinner than dust. The lost colors are not always gone forever. Some are simply still unread. Museum displays can make the process look finished. A dinosaur stands under lights, labeled, mounted, named, measured. The bones are clean. The case is quiet. The skin impression rests in a drawer or behind glass. The reconstruction beside it shows color and posture. Everything seems settled because the display has to be still. But behind that stillness, the animal is changing as science changes. A specimen collected in 1908 can be studied again with 21st century methods. A slab described as feathered can be re-examined with electron microscopy. A pigment interpretation can be tested with new chemical mapping. A skin impression can be scanned, photographed under different lighting, or compared with modern decay experiments. Fossils do not stop producing information when they are named. This is one reason old collections remain important. Not every discovery begins with a new expedition. Sometimes it begins in a museum drawer, where a specimen collected decades ago preserves details that no one recognized at the time. Paleontology advances when new questions meet old material. Skin, feathers, and color have all benefited from this. The fossils were waiting. The methods had to arrive. There is something fitting about that delay. A dinosaur waits in rock for millions of years, then waits again in a cabinet for the right instrument, the right question, the right person looking at the right surface under the right light. The past is not only hidden underground, sometimes it is hidden in plain sight. Technology has expanded what can be seen without destroying fossils. CT scanning can reveal internal structures inside blocks. Laser-stimulated fluorescence can make soft tissue traces stand out under certain conditions. Synchrotron imaging can map chemical residues at fine scales. Photogrammetry can capture three-dimensional surfaces in digital form. These tools do not replace careful observation. They extend it. The study of fossil color relies heavily on such tools. Scanning electron microscopes can image melanosomes. Chemical methods can detect traces consistent with melanin or other compounds. Statistical comparisons with modern feathers allow inference. Digital models can test lighting and camouflage. The work is interdisciplinary, drawing from paleontology, biology, chemistry, physics, optics, and computer modeling. Because the methods are powerful, they require restraint. A colorful result can attract attention, but the evidence has to carry the claim. Researchers have debated whether certain microbodies are melanosomes or microbes, how burial alters melanosome shape, and how confidently modern correlations apply to extinct animals. These debates are not signs of failure. They are how a young field becomes more reliable. The public often sees the final image first. A headline says a dinosaur was ginger, striped, black, or iridescent. The paper beneath the headline is usually more careful. It speaks of data, sampling, uncertainty, comparison, and probability. The animal becomes vivid, but the path to that vividness is measured. That measured path is important for Jurassical because wonder is stronger when it does not need exaggeration. A thin clay film preserving the skin of a duck-billed dinosaur is astonishing enough. A nodosaur with reddish-brown countershading is astonishing enough. A four-winged theropod with glossy black feathers is astonishing enough. The science does not need to be inflated to feel cinematic. The cinematic quality comes from the evidence itself. A fossil foot showing a hoof-like covering, a tail with bands, an armored back with pigment, a feather under a microscope, a badlands slope after rain where a piece of dark texture appears in pale rock. These are small images, but they open into entire worlds. Many of the best dinosaur fossils come from ordinary acts of erosion. Wind, frost, rain, plant roots, and seasonal storms expose bone and skin. A fossil may appear as a small edge in a hillside. Too much erosion can destroy it. Too little leaves it hidden. Fieldwork often depends on recognizing the right fragment at the right moment. A scale impression might be no more than a rough patch until trained eyes understand it. The quarry face does not announce what it holds. It gives a line, a color change, a texture, a curve. Someone kneels. Dust is brushed away. The difference between stone and skin becomes visible. The animal, which has been gone since the Cretaceous, returns first as a surface under a hand. Once found, exceptional fossils are vulnerable. They may be fragile, heavy, weathered, or encased in unstable rock. Field crews jacket them in plaster, map their position, record orientation, collect surrounding sediment, and transport them carefully. A dinosaur mummy can weigh many tons or crumble at the edges. Saving it requires logistics as much as scientific insight. Borealopelta's recovery, for example, required extraordinary preparation after its discovery in the mine. Blocks were removed, transported, and prepared over years. The fossil's eventual appearance in a museum is the visible end of an enormous chain of labor. The animal's preservation is ancient, but its scientific existence is modern work. Every fossil surface has human hands near it now. The hand that finds it, the hand that jackets it, the hand that prepares it, the hand that steadies a microscope slide, the hand that draws the reconstruction, the hand that guides a visitor's attention toward a patch of skin that might otherwise look like stone. None of this reduces the animal. It reminds us that paleontology is a relationship between deep time and present effort. The dinosaurs do not speak. The rocks do not organize themselves into stories. People gather evidence, test ideas, revise mistakes, and build reconstructions that are always provisional. Skin and color discoveries are part of that continuing revision. The revisions have made dinosaurs more varied, but also more ordinary in the best sense. They were not movie creatures waiting for dramatic entrances. They were animals with feeding routines, body coverings, parasites, injuries, growth stages, and visual signals. A mummy does not make them monstrous. It makes them bodily. Bodies are specific. They have surfaces. They age. They carry marks. They touch the ground. They are seen by other bodies. When the fossil record returns even a little of that, the dinosaur age becomes less distant without becoming less strange. The strange part is that such fragile evidence survived at all. A feather can rot in days, skin can loosen in hours, color can fade in sunlight. Yet in the right mud, under the right chemistry, after the right death, something remained long enough to be transformed. The most perishable parts of a dinosaur sometimes became the most revealing. That is the central paradox of dinosaur mummies and lost colors. The softest evidence can make the hardest corrections. Return for a moment to the first patch of skin under glass. It is small compared with the animal. It may come from the side, the tail, the neck, or the foot. It cannot roar. It cannot move. It cannot show the color it once carried unless chemistry preserved a clue. Yet it is one of the closest contacts we have with the living dinosaur body. Not the framework, the surface. A bone tells us the shape beneath. A skin impression tells us what covered it. A feather tells us how the body interacted with air and light. A melanosome tells us that pigment once sat in a cell. A track tells us that the surface of a foot pressed into mud while the animal was alive. None of these alone gives a complete dinosaur. Together, they make the reconstruction harder to dismiss as imagination. The main lesson is not that every dinosaur now has known colors. Most do not. It is not that every dinosaur was feathered. Many had scales, armor, bare regions, beaks, claws, and mixed coverings. It is not that mummies preserve original flesh. Often they preserve impressions, mineralized tissues, or sediment templates. The lesson is more careful. The outside of dinosaurs can sometimes be studied directly, and when it can, it changes the animal. Edmontosaurus changes when its hooved feet and pebbled skin are restored. Borealopelta changes when its reddish-brown armor and camouflage are restored. Sinosauropteryx changes when its banded tail and filamentous covering are restored. Oncornis changes when its patterned feathers are restored. Microraptor changes when its glossy black plumage is restored. Psittacosaurus changes when its countershaded body is restored. These changes are not cosmetic. They alter locomotion, camouflage, display, thermoregulation, ecology, and behavior. They alter the way an animal stood in its habitat and the way another animal saw it. They alter the difference between a dinosaur as a skeleton and a dinosaur as a participant in a living world. The lost colors that remain unknown are just as important to remember. The face of a triceratops, the throat of a hadrosaur, the juvenile plumage of a tyrannosauroid, the bare skin around the eye of a small theropod, the seasonal changes of a polar dinosaur, the colors that did not come from melanin, the ultraviolet signals no human eye could see. These are not empty spaces. They are reminders that the Mesozoic was larger than the evidence. A Cretaceous morning would have held more than bones. Mist over a river channel. Ferns and flowering shrubs along the banks. Insects moving near water. A hadrosaur herd shifting through low vegetation, their skins textured and dusty. A nodosaur standing half hidden in shade. A small feathered animal on a branch, dark until the light catches it. A tyrannosaur in the distance, not a museum skull, but a moving body with muscle and skin. None of these scenes can be filmed. No one will stand there with a camera. The Mesozoic is gone in the ordinary sense. But geology has kept fragments of its surfaces, not enough to make it whole, enough to make it particular. Enough to tell us that the animals had pebbled skin, keratin sheaths, hoof-like feet, feathered limbs, striped tails, glossy plumage, countershaded bodies, and colors that sometimes survived as microscopic traces. The asteroid at the end of the Cretaceous erased the non-avian dinosaurs, but it did not erase the entire story of dinosaur skin. Birds survived. Their feathers remain living evidence of a dinosaur invention. Every wing carries a history of filaments, veins, pigments, molt, display, and flight. A crow's black sheen, a sparrow's patterned back, a gull's pale belly, an owl's soft flight feathers, all belong to the surviving branch. This does not mean we can read every extinct dinosaur through birds alone. Living birds are specialized survivors, not frozen ancestors. But they show what dinosaur surfaces can do. They show how feathers grow, wear, color, signal, insulate, and move. They remind us that the dinosaur body was never just bone. Fossils and living birds together create a bridge. One side is stone, Edmontosaurus skin, Borealopelta armor, Anchiornis feathers, Microraptor melanosomes, Psittacosaurus countershading. The other side is life, plumage, scales on feet, beaks, claws, molt, display, song, movement. The bridge is incomplete, but it is real. It lets us infer without pretending that inference is certainty. A feather in limestone and a bird feather on a windowsill are separated by more than time. They are separated by extinction, evolution, burial, mineralization, discovery, and interpretation. Yet, they share structure. They share a history. The living feather makes the fossil feather less alien, and the fossil feather makes the living bird older than it seems. Perhaps that is why skin and feather fossils feel so intimate. Bones belong easily to death. Skin and feathers belong visibly to life. When they fossilize, they carry the shock of the living exterior into the realm of stone. They make a dinosaur look as though it has only just stopped being an animal. That impression is an illusion, but a useful one. The animals are gone. The tissue is usually gone. The colors are partial. The surfaces are altered. The fossils have passed through enormous time. Still, the preserved details came from real bodies. They are not symbols. They are evidence. Evidence is enough. A clay film thinner than paper. A scale pattern in sandstone. A feather halo on a slab. A melanosome under an electron microscope. A dark chemical stain on an armored back. A hoof-like covering at the end of a hadrosaur limb. These are small things compared with the animal, but they carry the animal outward. The next time a dinosaur skeleton stands in a museum hall, it may help to imagine what is missing around it. The hide over the ribs, the skin around the eye, the surface of the foot, the keratin on the claws, the color on the back, the feathers, if the lineage carried them, the scars, and wear, the dust on the flank, the way light would have moved across the body, not to cover the bones with fantasy, but to remember that the bones were never alone. The fossil secrets of skin, feathers, and lost colors do not bring the dinosaurs fully back. They bring them closer. They narrow the distance between a mounted skeleton and a living animal standing in heat, shade, wind, or rain. They show that deep time did not erase every surface. Some survived as impressions, some as chemistry, some as shadows, some as living feathers on birds that still cross the sky. In the end, the most powerful fossil may be the one that asks us to look slowly, not at the teeth first, not at the horns, not at the size, but at the small repeated shapes where skin once met the world. The scales are still in the stone. The feather is still a dark line. The color is partly gone and partly waiting. The animal is absent, but its surface remains. There are places where the rock still holds these surfaces without anyone knowing. A hillside in Montana, a badlands slope in Wyoming, a quarry in Alberta, a slab in China, a limestone bed in Germany, a drawer in a museum collection labeled years ago and waiting for a different kind of question. The next dinosaur color may not come from a new skeleton. It may come from a stain already collected, from a feather already described, from a patch of skin someone once thought was only texture. This is how paleontology often works. It advances through spectacular discoveries, but also through re-examination. A fossil does not have a single meaning fixed at the moment of collection. It has meanings that unfold as techniques improve. The first scientist may describe the bones. Another may study growth. Another may examine the sediment. Another may find melanosomes. Another may model camouflage. The same animal becomes more complete across generations. The long timescale of the Mesozoic makes that process feel appropriate. Dinosaurs lived for more than 160 million years before the end Cretaceous extinction removed all non-avian lineages. Human science has studied them for only a tiny fraction of that time. We should expect revision. We should expect surprise. A science so young, studying a world so old, cannot be finished. The surprises are not always loud. Sometimes they are small, a scale that is larger than the scales around it. A row of tail spikes in soft tissue, a foot covering shaped differently than expected, a pigment residue on the back of an armored animal, a microscopic body inside a fossil feather, a pattern that was invisible until someone asked whether color could survive. The dinosaur age becomes richer through these small corrections, not because it becomes more dramatic, but because it becomes more exact. A specific animal in a specific place with a specific surface is more powerful than a vague giant in a vague past. The old world is still mostly hidden. We do not know the color of most sauropods. We do not know how many hadrosaurs changed color with age. We do not know the full display patterns of ceratopsian frills. We do not know whether many large theropods carried subtle feathering, bare skin patches, or seasonal changes. We do not know the colors that vanished because the chemistry could not hold them. But ignorance is not the same as emptiness. It is a map of where the evidence has not yet reached. Some of those regions may stay blank, others may fill suddenly, with one fossil that preserves what should have disappeared. That is why a quarry face still matters. That is why museum drawers still matter. That is why a small rough patch on stone still matters. A dinosaur mummy is not a miracle outside nature. It is nature behaving in a rare sequence. Death, drying, burial, clay, minerals, pressure, erosion, discovery. A feathered fossil is not a message sent to us. It is a body caught in sediment. A color reconstruction is not a full resurrection. It is a careful reading of microscopic remains. Their power comes from the fact that they are real, not from pretending they are complete. Real traces are enough to change how the mind stands in the Mesozoic. The ground is no longer walked by gray outlines. The animals are no longer only bone shapes. The floodplain has bodies with skin. The forest has feathered movement. The armored herbivore has a dark back and pale underside. The small theropod has a banded tail. The glider flashes black-blue in the light. The duckbill leaves a footmark shaped by soft tissue. Even the living world becomes different after this. A pigeon on a station roof is a dinosaur with feathers. A crow's iridescent wing becomes part of a much older experiment. The scales on a bird's foot recall the mixed surfaces of theropods. The feather on a path, light enough to move in a breath, belongs to a history that once passed through Jurassic limestone and Cretaceous ash. The non-avian dinosaurs are extinct, but their surfaces are not entirely gone. Some are fossilized, some are inferred, some survive transformed in birds, some remain unknown. The work of science is to separate these categories without losing wonder. Known, likely, possible, unknown, each has its place. The final image does not need to be complete. It can be a stone slab with a feather, a hadrosaur foot with a hoof-like edge, a nodosaur shoulder covered in armor and old pigment, a patch of pebbled skin beside a rib, a microscope image of melanosomes. These are fragments, but they are fragments of the outside of animals that once moved through real air. The rock closes around most things. It takes the breath, the sound, the warmth, the smell of plants crushed underfoot. It takes the colors that did not survive, the behaviors no surface could record, the exact look of an eye in sunlight. But sometimes it keeps the boundary where life touched the world. A scale, a feather, a stain, a thin film of clay. Enough to show that the dinosaur was not only a skeleton waiting underground, but a living body covered in surfaces that met the day. The skin is still there in places, not alive, not soft, not whole, but patterned. The feather is still there in places, not lifted by wind, not groomed by a beak, not warm against a body, but visible. The color is still there in places, not as the animal saw it, not as another dinosaur saw it, not fully, but partly, in microscopic forms, in chemical shadows, in the patient language of stone. And where the color is gone, the absence has its own shape. It surrounds every fossil like the missing air around a mounted skeleton. It reminds us that the dinosaur age was brighter, stranger, and more textured than the record can fully hold. Somewhere in that quiet room, the fossil also changes the scale of time. The skin pattern is not large, but it crossed an interval longer than any mountain range in the modern world has stood unchanged. Rivers moved, seas opened and vanished. Forests became coal, ash, shale, and sandstone. Mammals diversified. Ice ages came and went. Human hands learned to shape tools, draw animals, name bones, and build museums. Through all of that, a surface made for one dinosaur's body remained legible enough to be read. That may be the most restrained kind of wonder. Not the idea that everything can be recovered. Because it cannot. Not the promise that every dinosaur will one day have its true color restored, because many never will. The wonder is that anything so fragile could pass through deep time at all, and that a pattern once used by living skin can still guide the eye after the animal, the riverbank, and the climate that shaped it have all disappeared. A small patch of fossil skin rests under glass. The room is quiet. The animal is gone. Yet the scales remain, arranged as they were on a body that once crossed a riverbank, stood in sunlight, and carried its own color into a world that no longer exists.